So this is the rig I'm going to be using today. So this is the Aya rig from Animation Mentor. And for many of you in Animation Mentor, if you're in class 2 right now, you're going to be doing a vanilla walk assignment, and you're going to be using the Stella rig from Animation Mentor. They are both very similar. The Stella rig is a simpler version of Aya, essentially. They have the same setups in their controls, the same basic fundamentals to the rig. So for any of you who are working on that, even though you're using the Stella rig or the Stewart rig, whichever one, a lot of the same elements are going to apply, the same controls, all of that. So I used Aya here just so we can go over a few more advanced mechanics as well, just because. Sora, I'd be happy to do a snappy animation demo. I've done one in the past, but I need to do a new one. That is definitely something on my to-do list. I'll see if I can plan one out for the near future. So, for the vanilla walk, we've got our character. I've brought them into the scene here, and I've created a very simple setup for the shot. And what I mean by setup is just the layout in Maya. So for a vanilla walk, and for most walks, the most important things are going to be your front and side camera view. So here we have the front view, here we have the side view. And these are both orthographic views. Orthographic means that there's no perspective depth. So for example here, you'll see that we get that depth in the hands. This hand here is bigger than that one. Just like if I did this, you get that depth in there. Orthographic views, so if I zoom in here, right there, and then let's show both hands like this, you'll notice that both hands are the same size right there. If I overlap them, perfectly the same size. There's absolutely no depth here. So the reason why we're looking at the orthographic views here is because it helps us to view the spacing and not to get caught on any perspective shifts and issues that could happen. We're not interested right now in doing a walk that looks good from a certain camera angle. We are interested in doing a walk that just looks good, period. It's just a mechanically sound walk. It works. So I've got those two views here. Now, something that I also want to create for this view is, or for this walk, I should say, is a ground plane for the character to walk on. This is very important, especially as you're doing a walk, because you want to be able to see when your character is going to hit the ground. If you don't have a ground plane, you can animate the walk. There's nothing wrong with that, but it actually makes it harder for our eyes to see when the foot is going to hit the ground. And then it makes it so that we have a harder time analyzing the walk and seeing what's wrong with it. So by adding a ground plane, just a simple ground plane like so, it makes it easier to figure out what's wrong with the walk. So I'm going to do that right here. And A to the J, thank you for all the resources there. That's awesome. A to the J, the walking animation repository of knowledge. It is, I don't know how he does it. He's got like this supercomputer, just a room full of monitors surrounding him. It's amazing. He has to. It's the only way. So at this point, I've got my scene pretty much set up here for the walk. Again, it's just the character. We've got a ground plane. That's pretty much it. That's all we really need. Don't have to go crazy with the setup here. Now, what I typically see when people start animating a walk is that they will go right from this T-posed character. T-pose is when the character is just in their default pose with the arms straight out like this. And they will just start animating. They'll go right into the walk right from here. You can do that. There's nothing technically wrong with that. The problem with that, though, is you are building your poses and you're building your walk off of an unnatural starting point. No human would start in a pose like this before walking. And what that does is it influences a lot of your first pose, that first contact pose in a walk. It's going to influence that and make it feel weird. So something that is a good thing to do is to just pose out your character into a more neutral and relaxed pose to start with. So that's what I'm going to do super quickly here. Now, part of relaxing the character, let's just start with the obvious. We're going to bring the arms down here, like so. Now, once the arms are down, clavicles will come down as well. A lot of people forget about that. When they bring the arms down and relax the character, they just forget about the clavicles, the shoulders there. Your clavicles are tied to your arms. They move sympathetically with your arms. And not only that, but just like how the character starts in the T-pose with their arm in this, you would say, an unnatural relaxed pose. There's no way our arm is going to be like that when we're relaxed. The shoulder is also in a T pose, an unnatural relaxed pose, because the arm is up. So when we lower the arm, we need to lower the shoulder as well. Otherwise, the character is going to feel like they're just walking super stiff and uncomfortably. So I'll bring that down. Another kind of common thing for relaxing the pose is bending the elbows. Our elbows, when we're relaxed, don't sit straight beside our body. They actually kind of bend forward, and our arms themselves kind of point back slightly. So we kind of get this S shape. Our wrists also kind of angle back like this. So if we look at the side view here, see how the arm is starting to get this S form in there? Just a little bit of a curve through there. That's going to help make the character a little bit more relaxed. And then I can push the shoulders back just a little bit as well, just to kind of have everything relaxed down. Now, for the feet, this is probably one of the most common issues that I will see with student work, is they leave the feet straight in line with the hips. So if we look at the hip joint of the character here, imagine where the hip joint is right there, go straight down. You'll notice that that foot is almost straight underneath there. Once again, this is basically the T pose. The legs are in their most boring pose because that's what's easiest to rig. That's what a T pose is. It's an easy to rig pose because everything is straight and in line. It is not a natural pose. A natural pose is our feet come in together for most people. So I'm just going to take the feet here and just push them in towards the center. And this is going to make a much more interesting and natural pose. It also just makes the character more dynamic because you get a little bit more of that triangle shape in there versus just a big square. Additionally, our toes point outwards when we stand. So something like that. So right there, I already have a much more natural pose to start with here, just by doing this. Now, from the side view, one of the most important things to keep in mind is the neck. When we open a rig, a lot of times the neck is very straight. You can see that right here. That neck is very straight up and down. Once again, this is a T-pose element. It's very easy to rig a character when their neck is straight in line with the spine because everything lines up. Very nice. This is not the way the human neck is. Our neck tends to lean forward a lot. Maybe not this far, but we have that forward lean there. So right at the start, I'm going to actually get that nice curvature here. And the way you can kind of think about it here is from the side view. Look at the rotation and curve of the spine here. Your neck kind of flows in with that. So we want that kind of nice curvature right through there. If it's straight like this, see how we get that curvature and then it just kind of disappears. There's no flow into the neck and head there. So usually with rigs like this, you can just use the bottom control. That's all you'll really need. And hey, Wookie, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Aw. That's so nice of you. So just like this, now we're going to have a little bit more of a natural, relaxed pose. The other nice thing about moving the neck forward is from the front view, oftentimes you'll notice that rigs have very long necks. They just feel very, very long and kind of giraffe-like. Partly that's because in most rigs they have more cartoony proportions, so bigger heads, smaller shoulders. It makes the necks look longer. Partly it's also because of the simplicity of the rig, I guess you could say, compared to the real world. Necks just look longer. If you actually look at how long people's necks are in real life, especially very thin people, you'll notice that necks are actually weirdly long, especially when you see it from the side view. So by tilting the neck forward, you can see it here, my neck actually looks like it shrinks. It looks like I have less neck from the front by kind of pushing this forward. So it's not only going to give you a more natural pose, it's going to help avoid that just kind of extra long neck in your shots. So with that, we've got a more natural state already. And I saw a question here, how come they don't start by the setup of the rig? Oh, wait, how come you don't start by the setup of the rig? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean why we don't have this pose as the starting point versus the T pose? Or let's see, how come you don't start by the setup? Or do you mean bring the rig, the whole process of bringing the rig in? Why we didn't cover all of that? For that question, if that's what you mean, I just figured referencing in the rig wouldn't be that interesting to look at. Essentially, it's just going to file, create reference, bring in your rig file, and that's about it. And then if you meant like, why don't rigs start in this more interesting pose, more natural pose? Maybe they're rigged like a T pose, but then for the animators, it's kind of brought back into a more character pose. There's actually multiple reasons for that. One is when you're bringing in a character, we don't actually want character on the rig to start with, because the character could be anyone. When you're working with a school rig like this, like Aya, she could be a nice, calm person. She could be an energetic just ball of fury and just anger. She could be the most laid back person all in the world, just totally calm about everything. Every shot that a student or someone will create with this rig is the chance to have a totally unique character. And if the pose has character to begin with, that's going to influence what people make with that rig. So by having kind of the most bland T pose, it makes it so that you have more choices to start with. Now, in a studio environment, you already know who you're going to be animating. For example, if you're animating the new Puss in Boots has his character. He has a very distinct character. Little Jack Horner has his very specific character. Soft Paws has her specific character. We know who this character is supposed to be. So why don't we start them in a more dynamic pose? Well, mostly is because if the rig gets updated in the pipeline, it could break something. So for a lot of you who haven't worked on a pipeline or haven't kind of explored that, when you're working on a studio project, very often you are going to start animating your characters before the riggers have actually finished rigging the rig. So you are actually working and animating as they are rigging the character and making all the extra cool controls and everything. And they will be updating the rig as you're animating, and then you're going to be sent an updated version that you have to put into your scene and update through your shot. So if that rig doesn't start in a T pose, it makes that entire process much harder. So that T pose, or sometimes it's called an A pose if the arms are a little lower, those are very important for the pipeline to keep things going smoothly. Otherwise, it just can run into a lot of complications. So I hope those answers the questions. If they don't, definitely feel free to re-ask the question there. And Tiki, ça va bien? How are you doing? Tiki, hello, bonjour. Jumping back in here, we've posed out the character and we've just essentially relaxed the character, brought them more into a natural state. Now, we want to start animating this vanilla walk. For anyone who hasn't studied walks before, walks can be broken down into a few key poses that we need to hit. So we will need to hit the contact pose. That's when the foot touches the ground. We will need to hit the down pose. That's when the hips are at their lowest. We'll need to have the passing pose, where one leg passes in front of the other. The up pose, where the hips are at their highest. And then we go back into the contact pose. So we've got contact, down, passing, up, contact. In that order for a vanilla walk. Now, those poses apply to pretty much any walk you ever do. The only difference is that they can be in all sorts of different orders. So those are the kind of core principal poses for any walk, but then we can mix and match to make walks feel more dynamic and interesting. So for example, normally, when you're walking, you're going to have your contact pose and then you're going to go into your down pose as your body drops down. But if you got a more excited pose, you can have your contact and then from there you go up as you kind of get this big burst of energy. So an excited walk can go contact up, passing down. Sometimes you're going to have your up and your passing pose be the same pose. Other times your contact and your down could be the same pose. Sometimes if you, for example, you have a double bounce walk, that's the Pink Panther walk, that kind of walk like this, where you've got the double bounce. You're going to have 2 ups and 2 downs in that walk. But your basic walk has those poses in there, and those essentially are poses that allow us to structure and create, I guess, a structure for the walk to build off of, and we're not just putting keys randomly hoping for the best. So we're going to have those main poses in there. Once again, contact, down, passing, up, and then we go back to contact. And for a vanilla walk, the timing is pretty simple. It's a pose every 3 frames, and the whole walk from one step to the next is going to be 12 frames. So from 1 foot forward to the next is going to be 12 frames, and then 1 foot forward again, 12 frames. This is the standard timing for a walk, 12 frames per step. If you actually go out into the real world and time out people walking, not running, not jogging, just average walk, you'll notice that on average, it tends to fall around 12 frames or half a second per step. For more leisurely walks, kind of more relaxed strolls, it's going to be about 16 frames. For faster walks, not quite a jog, but kind of a speed walk, you're going to go more towards the 8 frame section. As it goes faster, it'll go to 6, maybe even 4 frames for like a really fast pitter-patter type walk. But on average, a walk is going to be approximately 12 frames. So vanilla walk, we're going to hit right at that average mark, 12 frames per step. So we know the timing. We know it's going to be a pose every 3 frames. So contact, 3 frames later, down, 3 frames later, passing, 3 frames later, up, and then contact again, 3 frames after that. And we know all the poses we need. Great. That's pretty simple. Vanilla walks are going to be easy. We've got all the things we want. Yay. They are not. I'm going to put this, before we even start animating this, I'm going to put this out there. Vanilla walks are one of the hardest things you are ever going to animate. They really, really are. And for any of you right now who are animating a vanilla walk and you are maybe frustrated with why is this not working and why is it so difficult, it is literally because it is one of the most difficult things you will ever animate. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, is even though we have the whole structure, we've got the timing, we've got the poses, we've got essentially just this layout all done for us that we just have to follow along. It is so precise, these types of motions and these types of things that we have to do, that any little deviation can break something, can cause knee pops, can make the character wiggle and waggle all over the place. It just falls apart. The second and the more crucial one is that evolutionarily, we as humans have learned to look at walks. We study walks every day, and we understand how they work at a fundamental level. Maybe not a conscious level, but at a fundamental level. And if anything is ever so slightly incorrect in the walk, it's gonna stand out. The reason for this is we are hunters. We have evolved to understand how creatures move and to pick out the animals that are sick, the animals that are wounded, just by how they move, so that we can know which one to attack and which one to go for. As humans, we also are used to seeing each other walk, and we can pick up on differences to know if someone is sick, if someone is injured, if someone is not normal, and normal like in their regular state of being. We can pick up on that. If any of you have ever had that moment where you hear someone walking in the house or somewhere and you go, oh, I know who that is, just by the sound of their footsteps. We have evolved to the point where we can understand the cadence of someone's footsteps and differentiate that from anyone else. We are very good at analyzing walks, even though we might not know about it. We might not think we do. So if anything in this vanilla walk that we're going to animate is ever so slightly incorrect, is going to look wrong. It's going to just stand out like a sore thumb. It's the same thing with eyes. We know how to look at eyes. If anything is off with an eye pose, it stands out like a lighthouse just blaring into our eyes. So we have to be very careful when posing eyes, and we have to be very careful when animating walks. So with that fun warning out of the way, let's dive in. So like I was saying, first pose we have here is our contact pose. Contact pose is one foot stepping forward and about to contact the ground. Pretty simple. Except, how far do we put that foot? Let's kind of take this foot here and move it forward. How far do I move it forward? What is the stride length for this pose? I could go this far, this far, this far. I don't know. Well, this is where you want to analyze your reference. I don't have reference here because I've animated these walks many, many, many times. When you are animating your walk, you want to have reference. You want to analyze your reference, study it. Look for these things and answer your questions. So for example, I have the question, how far should this foot be on this step? Okay, look at your reference. How far does the foot go in your reference? You analyze that and you kind of find a base. And ideally, you should also look at multiple pieces of reference. So you're not just animating that person's walk, but you're finding the kind of average that people do. The average is that we have a foot length in between our foot, or our feet, I should say. So our stride is 1 foot length. So for example, here, if I wanted to get very technical, that's 1 foot right there. All I would have to do is move that foot. Let's actually put a marker here just so we can see this. I would not normally use markers when I'm doing this because it's not really necessary. But just for the sake of demos, let's see, locators right here. And change our background so we can see it. So there's that foot length right here. An average step would be about that wide. So 1 foot length in between both feet. Once again, do you have to do this? Do you have to be that accurate? No. It's just kind of an average. The other kind of element to keep in mind is that your character might not have human proportions. Your character might have tiny, teeny little baby feet. They might have big, giant clown feet. that's going to change things, and you're going to adapt to that. But on average, we can use that as kind of a base here. So I'm going to move that foot forward and actually make sure that I'm not moving it outwards either. So let me actually undo this super quick. So what was happening there is I was moving the foot in object mode, but because I rotated the foot, see how it's going out at an angle and the feet are going like this? I don't want to do that. I just want to move the foot straight forward. So I'm going to switch my manipulator into world mode, and this way I can just drag this straight forward and I don't get that little offset there. So about a foot length right there. There we go. So that's my stride length. Great. And I should actually also set a key on everything because that's going to be useful. Okay. So just select everything, set a key. Okay. So for the contact pose, your foot's going to be up as it's contacting the ground, something like this. And then your back foot is going to be raising up. So you're going to get something like that. So that's the basics of the feet for now. We're going to jump in and kind of adjust them as we go, but that's kind of the basics for the feet. What's happening with the hips? The hips are balanced between the feet and the body is pushing forward. Something to keep in mind with a walk is that it is a controlled fall. Essentially, when we're walking, we are leaning forward, letting gravity pull us down, letting it drag us forward and down, and then we just catch ourselves. It's a very energy efficient walk. So I want that character to feel like they are not like super forward like this, but kind of between both feet. If the character feels like they're doing this, now they feel like they're stepping backwards. They're too far back in comparison to their feet. So I'm going to just kind of bring this character forward here. Something like that. I'm going to figure out the exact range in just a second here. But we've got that right in there. So this is the basics at this point. Now, for the legs, on a contact pose, the front leg should be straight. The back leg should be slightly bent. This will change depending on the style of walk that you're doing, but for a vanilla walk, front leg straight, back leg bent. It helps to create a nice impact and a nice push off to the walk. Now, as we go through this, we need to think of how are we going to approach the spine and how we're going to rotate this character. And once we have that, we'll be able to get the whole body and the hips kind of posed out. But this is a very important thing to think about. So on many rigs, you're going to have multiple sets of controls here. So I have a cog. The cog control is the center of gravity control, COG. And it is what controls typically the whole overall body motion. This is the control I am going to be using for the forward motion of the character, as well as the side-to-side motion of the character, and the up and down motion of the character. It just moves the entire character across. Great. We can also use this to rotate the character side to side like so. So this could be our rotations here. But we also have a set of FK spine controls, forward kinematics, FK, and then inverse kinematics, IK controls. On this rig, the FK controls are the red controls. So if I take these top three controls, this will bend the spine right here. And then we have the hip control right there that moves the hip. And then we have the IK, which once again moves the hip and the spine right there through there. So we have three sets of controls: COG, FK, and IK, and all of these can adjust the spine. So for example, I can move the spine side to side this way, or I can use the FK controls, or I could use the IK controls. Which ones do you use, and what's the best way to use them? Honestly, it's whatever you prefer and you're comfortable with. But there are certain things you want to watch out for. One is that you very rarely want to ever mix FK and IK controls together. So if you're going to animate the spine with the IK controls, do not use the FK. If you're going to use the FK controls, do not use the IK. One or the other. If you mix and match, it's just going to lead into a nightmare of counter animation. Now, from there, how do you rotate the spine? Well, this is whatever you are most comfortable with. For me, I tend to prefer the method that reduces the amount of counter animation that I have to do and the amount that I have to fight the rig. So, as an example here, let's say I want to tilt the character to the side slightly so I get a weight shift in there. If I was to use the cog to do that, like so now we get that nice angle in the hips right here. What this means is I'm now going to have to take my spine, I'm going to use the FK in this case, and move this back to balance the character out. That's really good. And in animation, that forces you to make sure that you're animating the spine correctly and you get that motion in there. That's very nice. The problem, though, with this method is now let's say we've got this pose, beautiful. I've tracked all my arcs, amazing. I've got the nose, just the perfect arc going through there. The neck, perfect arc going through there. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, but I feel like I could push those hips just a little bit more. I can just get a little bit more of a interesting spacing in there. Okay, let's push that. Boop. It moved the whole spine. Everything, all the way up. I've ruined all of the and I have to go through my spine controls and counter animate that and bring it back to where it used to be. Oh, my mic is crackling. Let me see. Is anyone else hearing the crackling? Let me restart my mic here. Fixed now? Okay, cool. It was brief. Interesting. Definitely let me know if that's happening. I switched mics because my mic stand actually broke, so I can't use my old mic. So hopefully this one's working. Yeah, so when we are rotating the hips here and using the cog, we're going to be counter animating that spine a lot. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, not necessarily, but in terms of polish and refining and cleaning my arcs, this is something I want to avoid because it's just going to make my life harder. So, for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of using the cog when I'm animating something like a walk like this. Generally, my rule of thumb for using a cog, so the center of gravity control, is whenever there's going to be a general line of action change or angle change throughout the whole spine. So it's not just the character doing this. If I'm just kind of wiggling a little bit, of course I wore a black shirt on a black background so no one can see. It's just a floating head. But if I do this, just a little bit of a wiggle, my overall spine direction is still straight up and down. There's no need to use a cog for that. Same thing with the twist of the body. If I'm doing this, my general direction is forward and I'm just kind of swaying on either side. So I'm probably not going to use the cog for that because once again, it's just going to lead to a lot of counter animation with the whole spine. But if my character was going to go whoop and lean over to the side like this, now the overall line of the spine whoop, is at an angle here. That is when I would use the cog and just use that as a general movement and a general change in the direction. Same thing if the character is walking and they're going to turn and now walk in this direction, that is when I would use the cog to turn the whole character. So I'm using it for the global motions, the global direction changes, not for the little adjustments of the body. That's the way I typically like to work with it. This way I am avoiding any counter animation in my work as much as possible. Now, if you want to move the cog to get all the motions, that's totally fine. Whatever works best for you, you just want to be aware of where there's going to be limitations. So for example, with the method that I typically use, the main limitation is that the side-to-side motion is going to have to be exaggerated. So normally if you use the cog to rotate the body like this, you'll notice that the whole spine angles, and then I get that neck to go right back into the center. Let's actually have that center line there. So you see here how the head is in the center and we get that curve in the spine. Very nice. We get that nice flow through there. But let's say I don't want to use my cog. What's going to end up happening is I use my hip control instead to get the line going through there, or sorry, the weight shift in the hips. And then I want to counter that with the spine. I do this. Now the head is off center, which means that I'm going to have to shift my weight further in order to keep that weight in that center. It's going to be a slightly different workflow in there. If I don't do that, my character is just going to be doing this as they walk. And that's going to feel very strange, and all of that is going to pivot from the belly button. So if you can imagine the character doing this side to side, oops, make sure I'm rotating only in one axis, like this, watch her belly button area in the front view. See how it just kind of, there's a spot where it just looks like there's a pin right there. She's stuck on a pin. That's what the walk is going to look like. It's just everything swinging around that one invisible point. We don't want that. So that's going to be the limitation of this workflow of using the FK spine and hips, is we're going to be very careful of the overall motion of the character, which the cog control would create a nice natural motion out of it. But I won't have to deal with counter animation, and at least to me, that's slightly more important in this case. And then same thing with the IK. If you choose to use IK, it's the same thing. I would use these for the main rotations, the small adjustments of the character. But with IK, the additional thing that you have to keep in mind is you have to translate the controls. If you don't translate them, your spine is going to stretch. So for example, if I do this, you'll notice that the spine has gotten much longer here because the character is just bending and forcing that spine to get pushed out. If I'm going to do this, I would then need to translate the spine over to the side, something like that. So IK, very nice. It can lead to very nice cartoony animation. It's great for layered animation. But if you're just starting out, it can be very hard to work with because it requires a good knowledge of how the body moves, the body mechanics under it, and the anatomy of the character. So be very careful with that. And to answer the question, how did I get that center line? I just turned on the grid, which is this button right here. It just turns the grid on and off. And here we're seeing the main center lines of the grid right there. So if I'm on the side view, we get that. The reason the grid itself isn't really showing is I'm just zoomed out far enough. If I zoom in, and for some reason it's not working for me today, you should see more of the checker pattern in there. So yeah, just turn on the grid. Let's see, question. I've been using the FK hip and the first red from the bottom FK spine, but for finer spine bends, should I keep using IK spine? If you're using the FK spine, you should only use the FK spine. If you're using a little bit of both, you're probably going to start running into some counter animation in there, and it's going to be a little finicky. Typically what I recommend when you're animating a spine for most characters, every rig is different, so you have to kind of figure out the method that works best for that rig. But for the Aya rig, for example, the easiest way to animate the spine is to select all three spine controls together and then just move them all as one single unit right here. And that way you get a nice general curve through the whole spine, and you don't have a kind of single bend here, and you get that kind of straight bend straight, which is, it's not bad, but it kind of defeats the organic purpose. It makes her feel more robotic because you get just that one hinge in there. So by selecting everything, you kind of get a general bend, but it's not the most natural spine pose because our spine rotates more from the bottom spine than it does at the top. The top is the rib cage. So this kind of going into more of the polish notes that we're going to get to later on. When you want to polish the spine, all you need to do, as you've animated everything together all as one unit, is go into your graph editor, scale up all the animation on your lower spine, go to your upper spine, scale down the animation on that. Now you've got a natural spine where the lower spine moves more, but everything is still connected, and you're done. And you've got a nice natural spine motion. So that's the way I typically approach it. Just select everything, move them together. And again, try to avoid mixing and matching unless there's a very specific reason for it. So, with all of that, let's actually start getting into the posing here. Let's see. Oh, and will that method of grabbing all three FK spine controls bite you in the butt, or is it really safe? It's totally safe, as long as you don't accidentally forget to select one of the spine controllers. So you just want to select all three and then move them all together. It's totally fine. Now, if you have the habit of accidentally forgetting one of the controls or missing it, what you can do is select all of them, go to Create, Sets, Quick Select Set right here, and I'm going to call this Spine. I'm just going to hit Add to Shelf right there. And for some reason, Maya doesn't like to do this for me. On your version, it should show up. There's a button here. It's invisible right now. But if I click on it, there you go. It selects the spine for me. Done. So whenever I need to select the spine, I'm good. Now, you mentioned like a pendulum, you shouldn't grab all the joints. The spine and a pendulum are different. A pendulum is overlapping action. You have one joint that leads the action, then another joint, then another joint. You get this overlapping breaking up of joints right through there. The spine is an entire column. It is not the lower spine leading and then the middle spine and then the top spine and they're all offset and they're wiggling. It is one solid piece that is flexing as the entire muscle of your back pulls on it. So it's more like a bowstring. If you imagine like pulling on a bow, you've got that curve. And let me actually draw it out. I've got a drawing tool. I've got a pen in my hand. Why am I miming things? So let's see here. So if we have a bowstring or a bow like that, wow, beautiful drawing. And we pull it back right there. What we're not getting is separate joints that all kind of move independently, and we get bottom half that moves, then the middle, then the top. Everything gets pulled back evenly on that bow because we get that one pull right here and everything bends. That's what's happening with our body. You've got, let's say, your lat muscles, that's the big muscle over here. You've got your obliques, all of these muscles, when they tense up, that's what's moving our spine, and it's curving the entire spine as one unit. Parts of the spine will move more, the lower spine, but overall the whole spine flexes and moves together. We can exaggerate and offset later on if we want to kind of make a little bit more of a leading action, but overall it is one unit. So we do not want to animate like a pendulum where it's just one joint, then the next, then the next. And a pendulum, you will get poses like this. And let me actually get this here. So you got the pendulum, it's swinging through, and you're going to get, let's see, trying to think of the exact position for this. It's swinging through this way, and then yeah, you can get this kind of pose where this is dragging through. So this is actually going the other way. This is going this way, and this is still going that way, like so. So you get that S shape in that pendulum for one frame, maybe two. You will never get this in a spine unless you're doing a really cartoony animation. If your spine pose gets an S shape, you've broken that character and they are in serious pain. The spine should almost always be a C shape. So your torso here should almost always be kind of this C shape, like a bean. So you're just posing the character like a bean right there. Or the flour sack. If any of you have ever seen the little flour sack assignment that 2D animators do, that's the reason why they do it. It is essentially the human body. All you need to do is add legs onto there and then arms, and you've got the human torso. It is a flour sack. And you've got your neck right here. There we go. So, yes, we do want to be careful with the spine, but you don't want to animate it like a pendulum. There's pendulum elements in there, the way it kind of flows, but it does not have this disconnected feeling or separate joints moving independently. Let's see. If you're animating a shot where two characters never have a two-shot or wide shot, okay, let me get to those questions there afterwards, just because it's a little off topic there, but definitely ask them again. I just want to make sure I can get to the vanilla walk here. I heard that if you bend the top parts of the spine, you basically would break the rib cage. If you go too far, the rib cage is a rib cage for a reason. It's not a solid bone plate in there where it's just like, your rib cage could just be an actual shield, a solid bone, just shield right in there to protect your heart and lungs. Evolutionarily, that would be much better, wouldn't it? Just to protect yourself? No, it's a rib cage. It's all different bones that come together and there's gaps in the middle. The reason for that is we flex. As you bend here, your ribs are going to actually compress together and separate out on this side slightly. They flex and bend with your vertebrae. So it's not an actual solid cage. It's going to be stiff, definitely. If it was just super mushy, your heart and your lungs and all of that good stuff that we need to survive, they would not be in good shape afterwards. But it is not going to be absolutely solid. The other thing is that when you breathe, just take a really deep breath and feel your rib cage. You're going to feel that your ribs actually expand. Your ribs kind of expand and then contract in as you breathe. So once again, the ribs flex a lot. If they didn't, when people breathe, you wouldn't see the chest kind of do this, because it would be a solid piece of bone that's holding the ribs, or sorry, that's holding the lungs in place. So hopefully it is creepy, isn't it? Once you realize that and you go, oh wait, this whole thing that I thought was absolutely solid is definitely not. The only solid part of your rib cage is right here. It's your sternum. There's a bone right there, which that is just a solid piece of bone that goes from here all the way down to the bottom. You can feel the point of it. If you just go down there, you'll feel the point of the sternum. That is a solid bone. And this is the thing that always annoys my father. He was a paramedic. If ever you watch in movies, they'll take a needle of, like, usually it's, what is it? Not steroids. That's not the right word. It's another, it's the thing that makes you hyper or like gives you energy. Adrenaline. There you go. So they'll take the adrenaline needle and just go right in the chest, right in the chest. And usually they aim kind of towards the center, and they just slam it in like crazy. My dad has had to do that, and every time he sees it in a movie, it's just like, oh, really? Like, if you did that, you would either bounce it off of a rib, break the needle off of a rib, or you'd hit the sternum based on where they're aiming, which would do nothing because it's a solid bone and you're just going to chip the needle into the bone. If you're really going to give someone adrenaline, you have to feel for the gap between the ribs, and you can do this yourself. Like, just kind of press into your chest. You're going to feel where a gap is between your ribs, and then you'd press it in. You don't just go into the chest. It's just going to hurt the person. So yeah, bone structure in the body, very important. So with all of that in mind, let's keep keep going with the walk. Now that we know the method that we're going to, it looks cool. That's true. That's the important thing in movies. It looks cool. So let's approach the walk now that we know the way we're going to animate the spine. So for this contact pose, the big thing that we are going to be doing is trying to balance the weight of the character as they walk and trying to get that forward lean through there. And also thinking of the sympathetic action of the walk. The sympathetic action is probably going to be one of the biggest things that you want to keep in mind whenever you are animating anything. Honestly, anything. You want to think of how is one part of the body going to affect another. So, for example, this character is taking a step forward. And let's just focus on the hips first. If I take that step forward with my, in this case, her right leg, what is her hip going to do? It's not going to stay still. Imagine reaching forward. So if I'm going to reach forward here, my chest is not just going to do this. It's not going to stay still. I'm going to reach forward and my chest is going to rotate to help me reach whatever it is I'm reaching for, the cookie jar on top of the fridge. I get that rotation. That's the sympathetic action. My body is helping that arm reach forward. So as she steps forward here, I'm going to take my FK hip and I'm going to rotate that forward here to help reach out with that step right there. Now it's not going to be huge. We're not doing a big wide run like this. That would be going into more personality walk. It's just going to be fairly subtle, but we need to get that in there right through here. Okay. So we've got that help in there. Let's actually get the rest of our rotations in here. So rotate Z. Rotate Z is going to be very dependent on if you're animating what is typically called a lazy walk or a energetic walk. So if we imagine the ball or if we imagine the hips as just a ball right here, and let's just do two versions right there. Imagine you've got your character taking a step right here and lifting up this foot like so. Which way is the hip going to drop? Your hip when you're normally standing, let's say we are standing at attention and our hips are straight right here, like that. We lift that foot, what's going to happen? It's going to be one of two things. It's either that hip is going to drop because suddenly there is no support on this side. Imagine a block of wood and you've got two supports under it like this. Now you remove one side, what's going to happen to the block of wood on top? It falls on that side. So that's what our hip will do. If we're doing a lazy walk, a walk where we are not putting a lot of energy into the walk, our hips will drop. But imagine the character is taking a very high step. Maybe they're trying to step up onto a big ledge or a box and they're doing something like this. What's going to happen? Well, they're going to raise up that hip because they're trying to help their body go through that entire motion right there. So imagine, again, I'm reaching up for something. What's going to happen? My body rotates to help it reach even higher. This is an energetic walk. The character's body is putting energy into the walk to help the leg be more active. So we've got those two choices to go with. Once again, look at your reference for this and study which way your reference is having that walk. In general, for vanilla walk, is typically the lazy method because it is the body just doing the minimum amount of work that it needs to. So it drops on the side that is lifting up off the ground here. Now, on a contact pose, which way do we drop it? Well, the very important thing, and we're going to cover this again later, the very important thing to keep in mind is that the contact pose, there is no weight on the contact leg yet. This foot has just touched the ground. Literally, this is the contact pose. The moment it goes, tink, touches the ground. If there's no weight in that leg yet, the pose before it, if we imagine that, would have been up here. That means that hip would have been dropped on that side, like that, if we're doing the lazy method. So on the contact pose, since there's no weight on that foot that hasn't affected the walk in any way yet, the weight is still going to be rotated like so, with the supporting leg, the back leg, being the thing that's pushing up into the hip right there. So we're going to have that angle through there. So we've got those rotations, and now we just need the rotate X. Rotate X in a walk, there really isn't any. Not really, not for a vanilla style walk. If there was, you'd see people walking like this down the street. Just do this in your chair for a little bit. Just bend your chest forward and back as you sit here. You're going to notice you get out of breath very quickly because your body is essentially crushing your lungs in and out, and you can't breathe properly. Our bodies don't do that. When we're walking, our spine, which is a column, it is a support, is just stiff, and we might have a tiny little bob in our spine, but very, very subtle. Overall, we just lean forward. We just kind of go, tuk, and then we walk, and we rotate, but we don't do this. Not with our spine, at least. So, rotate X, I'm going to leave alone for this. Now, you'll notice what I did here is I thought through each axis for the hips here. I thought, okay, what does the rotate Y do? What does the Z do? What does the X do? This is something that is very important whenever you're posing anything, is you want to think of every axis in a shot and what should be happening with it. If you don't, it's very easy to fall into the trap of just forgetting to animate something completely and missing out on an entire element of your shot. So, in this case, I went through all of my rotations. Now, I should also go through all of my translations. So, side to side, up and down, forward, back. For that, I'm going to be doing that on the cog, because that's going to be my global mover control. I'm not going to be moving the spine. So we've already done the forward motion. I'm going to have to readjust it here. And I actually think I could probably make this step a little wider, honestly. Just to make it a little bit more dynamic. Otherwise, she's going to look like she's shuffling. I'd rather have the steps slightly wide than slightly too narrow. So for the walk here, the first thing in terms of translation is going to be the side to side. And this is going to be very important because as we walk, we need to balance ourselves. So once again, let's go to our drawings here. If you've got your body here and we've got that center line, when you're standing normally, your body is kind of over top of that center line and it can be balanced between both feet very easily, like so, nice and in the center. When we take a step, so you raise one leg here, let's just go up like so. Your body can't just stay where it was before, like this. You're going to fall over because all of your weight is off balance. You need to be over top of your balance point. In this case, it's the foot that's supporting you. So to make this character balanced, what I would need to do is take the whole body, I'm just going to take foot here just for sake of ease, and move it under the character. Or for a walk, since we can't move the foot while it's on the ground, we would move the hips over top of the feet, the supporting foot. So now the character is in balance here. And this is why it's also very important to bring your feet in, because the wider your character stands, so let's say your character has just this really wide stance here, like so, and then he lifts this foot right here, ha, big wide cowboy step. Suddenly that balance point is way off balance, which means that he is going to have to move his entire body. I'm just going to move the leg once again here. He's going to have to move that way to the side in order to retain his balance. The narrower the stance, the less side to side you have to move. So that's very good. And this is actually the definition of what differentiates a typical masculine walk versus a typical feminine walk is women tend, just because of the hip anatomy, tend to have their feet closer together, while men tend to have their feet wider apart because of their hip anatomy. So men will have more of a wide side-to-side motion, whereas women will have more of a kind of narrower stance, but their hips will rotate a little bit more because of it. So you get a slight variation. Now, that is the cliche. If you actually observe men and women, you'll notice that there are many men who walk in a feminine way and there are many women who walk in a masculine way. It's just a generalization. So once again, when you're animating character walks and personality walks, you want to be very careful to not fall into the, oh, it's a guy, it has to walk in a guy way. No, who is this character? How do they walk? That's the question you want to ask. It is very dependent on the person and the character, not the generalization of the walk. So, I'm going on so many tangents today. It's amazing. We haven't even gotten one pose in, and it's been an hour and a half. Yeah. We want to balance the character over their supporting leg. Once again, contact pose, that front foot is just touching the ground. It hasn't done anything yet. So that hip is going to be over top, and let's actually show our center line again. Let's take that, and those hips are going to be over top of the supporting leg over here, and then they're going to swing over. So we're going to have a little bit of that translate X here. Now, forward translation, once again, all we really want to do is get that body to not feel like it's way back here. And so, thank you so much for the sub. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So, I want that character to be slightly leaning forward here in terms of the, or not leaning forward, but slightly forward with the translate Z, so we get that controlled fall feeling. And then the translate Y is really just whatever I can get to get a straight leg in the front leg and a bend in the back leg. So I'm just kind of playing around with that. And then from there, if I feel like, okay, I don't have quite enough of a bend in the back leg, I can also just push the foot roll here. There we go. Now, I will also globally rotate the body slightly forward here. Just a little bit. Once again, a walk is a controlled fall, so our body leans forward and then we just walk. This is not the body doing this as we walk. This is just a global orientation, like that at an angle. Our spine is not pointing straight up, it's pointing slightly forward. So by doing this, I create that more naturalistic motion. I also throw the weight further forward to get that fall feeling in there. If the body is straight up, or worse, if you angle the body back, now the character looks like they're kind of walking backwards, or they're doing that kind of lazy walk. Fred from Big Hero 6 has that style of walk, where his back is way back and his legs almost have to drag him forward. So I want that slight lean right in there. Now, from there, we've gotten the hips in place. We've got the legs. The lower half of the character is pretty much done for now. We're going to have to adjust things later, but this is good for now. What's the spine going to do? The spine counters the hips. That's really it. That's really all it does. The spine is there and moves in order to balance ourselves out. So, if the hip is angled this way in this step, the spine will be angled the opposite way. So look at the shoulders right here. Let me get that view back here. So you're going to get that. If I twist my hips this way, so the left leg is forward, well, the shoulders will go the opposite way. So the right shoulder is forward. So this leg is forward, so that shoulder is going to be forward. Now, it's not going to be much. If you're doing a personality walk, you can really push this to get that stylization in there, but for a regular walk, it's just a little bit of a flow in there. So we've got that, and rotate X, we don't have to worry about it. We got that forward lean, we're good. Later on, I might add a little overlap just in the polish phase, but that's not important right now. The most important thing is getting those global motions right in there. And then for the arms are just going to go opposite of the legs. So if that leg is forward, this arm is going to be back, and then this arm is going to be forward here. Now, as your arms go forward, they also come in and out. So you're not just doing this, you're doing this as you walk. So I'm going to try and get that in there just a little bit. Right through there. And don't rotate the arms too much. Especially for vanilla walk, you are not swinging your arms like a madman. It's just a little bit of a sway more than anything. And then the wrist here is going to kind of roll forward, while the wrist back here kind of rolls in a little bit like that. So your wrists are doing this slightly. Not much, but slightly. And then the last thing is the clavicles. The clavicles work with the body. So they are sympathetic, or sorry, not with the body, with the arms. So they just kind of do what the arm is doing. The basic example is if I swing my arm forward, and again, I'm wearing a black shirt on a black background. I always forget. If I swing my arm forward here, as I do that, my clavicle will go forward. As I swing my arm back, my clavicle goes back. As I swing my arm upwards, so the arm is swinging up, the clavicle goes up and then down and then up again over here as my arm goes back up. So we get that forward, back, and then up, down, up. So in this case, the character is swinging their arm forward and it's going upwards. It's swinging up. So I'm going to just push that clavicle forward and slightly up here. And this one, it's going to be back and a little less up, because as we go back, it doesn't go as high back there. And then if you're stuck with IK arms, how do you animate them in a walk without too many problems with the elbows bending? It's tricky. You kind of just have to place them into position and really watch your arcs. That's the big thing. If you're able to, you can create a constraint setup, but normally I would just really watch the arcs. I'm not a huge fan of IK hands in walk cycles because of that. It's very hard to keep those elbows from wiggling. The other thing you can potentially do is to copy. So you animate more of a layered method. You copy the body animation once you have that and place it on the arms so you can get the rotations in place. Or actually what I would do is create a constraint setup that's going to follow the body. So the arms follow the body a little bit. And then I can simply bake out the animation and adjust my curves. Something like that could help. The other thing is if you have a space attribute, you can change that to follow the chest. So now you're just adding a little bit of sway instead of having to rotate everything manually yourself. So there's a few different ways of doing it. Ideally, FK is a little bit better in walks just because it's easier to get the arcs in there. So we've got the shoulders in there. Now we can also do the neck and head. The neck honestly is going to do pretty much nothing during a walk because our neck is pretty stiff. It's just not going to be doing this, doing a pigeon walk, and it really doesn't move side to side. The head is very simple. The overall motion is going to be overlap in X. So it's going to be doing this. If you just take your hand and do this, you're going to have the rotate X of your walk. So as the body goes up, the head drags down. As it levels off, the head comes up. As the hips come down, the head kind of drags upwards, and then we get that overlap right in there. So that's going to be the main overlap in the head. I'm actually going to wait until I have a few more poses before I do that. It's just going to be easier to see. And then the Y and the Z, so rotate Y in this case, and then rotate Z this way, are sympathetic to the body. Again, like I said earlier, we're thinking of what is sympathetic. It makes it a lot easier. If I turn my body this way, you'll notice that my head is still facing forward, but watch my nose. See how my nose rotated slightly with my body here? That's because it's sympathetic. It's following that motion. Same thing happens if I tilt my body. My head wants to stay straight, but it's tilting slightly in the same direction as my body here. So if I know my body rotations, all I need to do is add just a little bit of that rotation to the head. There we go, done. And it can be very little. It doesn't have to be a lot. So with all of this, I've got my first pose roughly put in. Now, it took me an hour and a half to do this. That's because we're explaining every single tiny little detail here. Normally, it doesn't take nearly that long. Normally, it should be pretty quick. So let's actually go to the next pose and see how fast we can do that. There's definitely going to be some stuff that I need to point out, but it should be pretty fast at this point. And then how do you usually track the center of gravity during flips and jumps? Center of gravity during flips and jumps is typically in the belly button area. So it's not the hips, but it's slightly higher. And on most studio quality rigs, what you're going to have is an offset control. So for example, right now her rotation is in her hips right here. If I turn the gimbal control on here, this will give me an offset, which I can then just use to move like so. And now you'll see that my cog control, this is why it's a cog, center of gravity and not a hip control, rotates around the stomach right there. So essentially when the character jumps in the air, I would offset that control right there, and then I can just use the cog to get that exact path that I need. If you don't have that, what you can do is create a locator or an extra control right where you want that center of gravity is, and then constrain the cog or the main mover control to that locator and use that to create the arc as they're moving through the air. That way you get the perfect rotation point through the whole thing. So with all of that, let's go to the next pose here. So I'm going to take all my controls, go 3 frames forward to frame 4, hit S to set a key. So the next pose is the down pose. The down pose is pretty simple. Essentially, the feet flatten out, right there on the front, and the hips are going to go forward and down. Now, I should also make sure I take these knee PVs. You'll notice how my knee is starting to bend and break here. That's because I didn't move the knee PV, the pull vector here. You could just move these forward globally and then call it a day. But something that can help is just to change the space of the knee PV to follow something like the foot. So now as I rotate and move the foot, that knee just follows along with that. Or you could have it follow the hip, and now it's going to move with the hip control here. So you could do that. It's really up to you. For me personally, I like to just move these forward. And what I'll do is I'll just take both knee PVs and just move them like a huge distance forward, like so, just as far as I can. The reason for this is it gives me more control. The further they are away from the knee, the more precision I have. So a little tiny motion here, you can see I get just a few pixels worth of motion on that knee right there. But if this was, let's actually just bring the same one closer right here. If I move it a little bit, it sways that knee like crazy. So the further I have it away from the knee, the more precision and the less likely I'm going to have a knee wiggle in my shot. So we get that knee coming, or that foot coming down here. This one's going to be pushing up. So foot roll up right there. And then the body is going to move forward, like so. Now I'm going to exaggerate the down here. I'd rather make it too far than too little. Okay, so we go down. And now once again, we just need to think through all our different controls. That's really the core of it. So let's just do our rotations, and then we'll go into our translations. So rotations for the hip, down pose. All of the weight is now transferring from the back leg into the front leg. They are switching the weight over so that they can lift this back leg. That's what they are doing. They're preparing to push this forward. So what this is going to do is cause those hips to reverse in this moment. You're going to get this big reversal in here. Not only that, but as we step forward, that rotate Y is going to start pulling that leg forward right here. So that those hips are going to start to straighten out here, because everything in the body is helping to pull this leg forward and up for that step. If this kept dragging backwards, what would end up happening is the character is going to feel like their legs are just slapping around and the hips are just kind of doing their own thing, and it's going to feel very disconnected. So we need those hips to pull forward there. Those are my rotations. Again, rotate X, I don't need, because I've got that forward lean. That's all I need to worry about right now. Okay, translation on the hips. So this, I'm using the cog once again. We already pushed the character forward and down, so we've got all of that. Now we just need that X. Once again, the character is shifting their weight from one foot over to the other so they can lift that back leg. In order to do that, they need to shift their body weight over top of the supporting leg here, that front leg. So we're getting that weight shift to the side right there. Okay. From there, we go into the body. And the body is just going to counter the hips. So the hips were straightening out in Y. The chest is going to straighten out in Y. The hips reversed in Z, the tilt here, while the chest is going to reverse in that direction as well. So we get this. Now, it's a little too much right here, but I'm not worried about finesse right now. Right now, I'm just worried about getting it in there, and then from there, I can refine things. Now, the arms are going to start to come forward and down. Just a little bit. I'm not going to worry too much about that. And the head, once again, we can just start to bring that in a little bit and match the angles here. Just a little. But it's not going to be a huge amount. Honestly, I usually leave the head alone until I have most of the body motions, and then I'll put the head in, just because a lot of those rotations are so small, it just gets in the way to try and build them in right now. It's just more work that I'm probably gonna have to redo later. So might as well just leave it until I have everything else blocked out. I know that the body is working, then I just do the head and it's done. Honestly, the same with the arms a lot of the times. Unless the arms are doing a very crucial thing to the walk, I'll tend to just ignore them until I have the main body motion in there first. So right there, we've got our down pose. Pretty quick, at least for this first pass here. Now from there, let's take everything once again, move it 3 frames forward, and we'll set our key. So now we go into the passing pose. The passing pose is what I typically call a linchpin pose. And specifically because there are many elements of a passing pose that have to work correctly in order for the walk to work. They are very important to get right, and they influence the rest of the walk. So the main elements of the passing pose is that the character is going to be pushing off of their supporting leg here, and that leg is going to be either straight or slightly bent. I tend to prefer slightly bent because it just gives me room to move. And that supporting leg is going to lean forward. It is not going to be perfectly straight, and is definitely not going to lean backwards here. It has to have a slight lean forwards, because once again, a walk is a controlled fall. If you are not leaning forwards, you're not walking. So I'm going to have that slight lean in there. The passing foot, once it gets up into the air here, I'm going to zero out the foot roll and only use my rotations now for the foot. I do not use foot roll, that attribute, when the foot is in the air. It just kind of gets in the way. And on this pose, the foot is passing, or I should say the leg is passing the other leg. That's why it is a passing pose. So we're going to get something along these lines, somewhere around there. Now, once I do that, I can see that I need to push those hips just a little bit more forward there. Okay, so that's the feet for now. Now, actually, well, since we're on the feet, another element is, you'll notice on the front view, the foot's just kind of lifting up and going straight. When we walk, our feet move in an arc. So this foot is actually going to push off the ground and have a little bit of drag in here and move out and then back in. The closer your feet are together, the more your feet are going to move out as you take a step. Imagine walking on a tightrope and not moving your feet out. You're just going to kick yourself. And the wider your feet are, the more likely you're going to step in as you take each step. So in this case, because her feet are pretty narrow, I'm going to take her feet and arc outwards. Now, as we go through that, those are the feet. Now the hips, there is a few crucial elements that we want in here. The most crucial is the rotate Y of the hips. If this leg is passing right here, that means that that hip is also passing. It is going to go and flip to the other side. So right here, if my value right here in rotate Y is +9 right now, I need to rotate this until it is in the negatives so that it's on the other side and is not going to be zeroed out. I see a lot of students do that where they just zero out the hips on the passing pose. No, it is passing. It is past the 0 point. So you need to get that onto the other side. Otherwise, the leg is going to feel like it's just dragging the hips forward. It's going to feel disconnected. So that's probably the biggest thing right there. Rotate Z is going to dip down a little bit because now at this point, this leg is just in the air. It's free floating. It's going to drag that hip over and down even more. It's going to drag that. So we're going to push this weight across a little bit more here. Then for the translations, the hips are going to keep going screen left in this case, because once again, all of that weight is hanging off of this leg. We want to balance the character onto that leg right there. And then we already did the translate Z and Y, that forward and up motion. So this is pretty good already in the legs. Now for the chest, once again, it just counters the hips. Pretty simple. So if the hips have reversed their direction, so's the chest. It's going to go onto the other side there. And then I'm just going to exaggerate that rotation in the spine here, just like the hips. Once you have the hips in place, the spine just does the opposite in a smaller degree. So you're going to have more rotation in your hips, less in your chest. And should that give the feel that the hips are leading the foot? Not really. They're going to work together. If you were to rotate this really far like this, yeah, definitely that's going to create the feeling that the hips are leading the foot. But as long as they are just kind of working with it, then that's fine. We are just trying to get this to feel connected. And honestly, even if it does feel like it's leading the leg, that will usually be a little bit better because all of the muscles that are moving your leg up like this are your muscles right through here. Your glute muscles, your butt muscles, you've got your tendons right here that connect into your hip bone right there. All of these, as well as your quadriceps, those are all the muscles that are pulling the leg forward. And they're all connected to the hip. So if the hip is leading, it's just going to give the feeling that all those muscles are working together and like pulling even more. If the hip is dragging, this creates the weird feeling that all of those muscles are moving that leg that has to in order to move that leg forward, and yet the hip isn't doing anything with it either. So those muscles are activating but not affecting anything, if that makes sense. And that creates the feeling less that the muscles are activating, but more of like someone's pulling the leg, like grabbing the character's knee and moving them forward. So it creates this disconnected, almost unconscious motion. So we've got that. Now, I'm not going to touch the head. Like I said, I typically ignore the head for the most part. And then normally ignore the arms as well, but since we've already started posing those, I'm just going to get a basic arm pass through here. Now for me, on the passing pose, I do not like to flip the arms fully on the other side yet. I like to delay them a little bit. I find it just creates a nice stylization to the walk. But for this, I'm just going to bring them to the other side so we can compare later on. Essentially, I don't want the arms and legs to mirror themselves and be exact matches. By delaying the arms a little bit more, it creates a little bit more of a overlap in that upper body. The arms are like a pendulum. We talked about pendulums before and how the spine isn't a pendulum. The arms are a pendulum in this case. And the clavicles as well, I don't animate on my first pass. I showed it earlier because it's very important to think about and to make sure that you don't forget. But once again, I want to make sure I have the main arm motion in place because the clavicles follow the arms. Once I know what the arms are doing, the clavicles are going to be easy to put in. If I put them in now, I'm just going to be reworking them later and doing twice as much work. So I don't worry about them, but I do think about them. I know that they're something that I need to address. Let's see here. Let me just reset the wrist rotations here. Once again, I'll do the arms after I get everything else kind of in place here and refine those. So overall, this is working pretty well. I think I can push this slightly more forward here. I want that kind of general lean forward from the ankle up to the nose right there. So now we've got that. Okay. Now we go to the up pose, which is, at least in my opinion, one of the least understood poses, or misunderstood poses, I should say. It is the most misunderstood pose. And that happens for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is, Richard Williams. The Illusion of Life is one of the absolute best books for learning animation. It is amazing. I love that book. I would not be an animator without it. But, and many of you have probably heard me rant about this, there are two elements of that book that are incorrect. And it's not so much that they're incorrect, but people don't realize the true meaning behind them. The first one is in the vanilla walk, or in the walk demo, they have the character going forward like this on the up pose, and they do two things. They will use that foot roll and go way up like this to exaggerate that walk, and then the forward leg is something like this for the up pose. So you get that, and you get that big up pose. Great. Except this is nowhere near a vanilla walk. That is wrong on every level. We do not walk like this. This is more of a march and a very cartoony walk. And in Richard Williams' book, that's what he's showcasing. It's a very exaggerated walk example, but it is not the human walk. A human walk, first of all, our foot very rarely leaves the ground on an up pose. That foot should normally be flat for most people. Sorry. Did I say Illusion of Life? The Animator Survival Kit. Wow. My brain is not where it should be. Thank you for the correction there. Yeah, Richard Williams wrote the Animator Survival Kit. Ollie Johnston and... Wow. My brain is not in book mode right now. Ollie Johnston and... someone else wrote The Illusion of Life. 2 of the 9 Old Men. Why am I blanking on his name? Frank Thomas. Thank you. I had the Thomas, like Thomas something. No, Thomas. I flipped that name completely. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for all the corrections. This is why I like having the chat, because they can fix my misinformation right off the bat. I love it. So, in The Illusion of Life, nope. In the Animator Survival Kit, there we go. Wow. In the Animator Survival Kit, I told myself, don't say Illusion of Life. Don't say Illusion of Life. What did I say? Illusion of Life. In the Animator Survival Kit, on that walk example, on the up pose, we're getting back on topic, they show that foot pushing up off the ground. No. In most walks, that foot stays flat on the ground because it takes too much energy to push yourself up off the ground like that. So if anything, if we do want to exaggerate this, all we need is a tiny little amount of foot roll here. Just a little bit. The other reason that is important is if you go too high with the foot roll right now, you're going to mess up the entire foot arc as the foot raises up. It's just going to mess up your entire thing. It's going to make knee pops all over the place. It's going to be a pain. So don't do that too early. If anything, it's just going to be a little raise. Now, this means that the hips are not going to be able to go up as high, but that's okay. In general, if you want to exaggerate your up and down of the walk, you go to the down pose and bring that lower, and you can add a little bit more of a bend in the passing pose right in there. So that's what's going to get you that that exaggerated up and down motion. Why do they make the walk like that in the book if it's not correct? It is correct if you're doing a cartoony walk. That's the thing. A lot of people, when they look at that example, they are looking at it and going, oh, that's a vanilla walk. That's the basic walk. And it isn't a vanilla walk. It is a exaggerated cartoony walk, but a very basic cartoony walk. It has elements of what you would want to do when you're exaggerating. But when we're doing a vanilla walk, specifically a vanilla walk, that is not correct, because that is not how people move anatomically. It's how they move caricature. So with that, the next thing, and Mama Rook, hello, hope you're doing well. So the next thing, and probably even more important in many ways, is this passing foot. This passing foot, when you are walking, does not go up like this. It actually stays really low to the ground, skimming the ground. It is so close to the ground that if there was a stone in the way, you would trip on it and you'd stub your foot. That is very, very important here. A lot of people, when they do this big, high steps. That is a march. A vanilla walk, exactly, that's why we fall. We trip on the smallest little crack. So this foot is actually going to be more like this. And as we do that, you can see that we're starting to create an arc where the heel goes up, swoops down right here. And that creates that nice visual dynamic range for that foot versus just a big circle arc, which is boring and not as interesting, weirdly. So those are going to help get your up pose much more natural. Those two elements right there. Now, one thing I did forget on my passing pose, I believe I forgot to push this up a little, or out a little further here. So we want that arc to go through like so. Okay, so now we've got that up pose. We've got those feet in place. And yes, a 1/4 inch difference in elevation is a tripping hazard. I actually experienced this. Cameron and I were photographers for a walk for cancer. It was basically people walking to raise awareness and raise money for cancer research. And Cameron and I were asked to be the photographers for that event. This was many, many, many years ago now. And people were essentially just walking around a block, just doing a whole big event, raising money. It was a lot of fun. But there was one part of the sidewalk where there was a crack. And the crack was like that big. It's just enough where it's like just the barest amount where it offset. And we watched, I don't know how many people trip and almost fall on that tiny, tiny little lip of a crack, to the point where we actually had to go out and help them put barriers at that area so people would go around the crack, because so many people were tripping on the tiniest little thing. We do not raise our feet when we walk. We shuffle more than anything. So for a vanilla walk, do not do these big, high steps. It is not going to make a believable walk. It's going to make a march or a skip or something like that. So I'm going to keep that foot low. Now, from there, once again, we just go up into the hips and we think of our rotations, our translations, and then we go to the spine. So let's actually go into the rotations. So rotate Y is going to keep going. That foot is reaching further forward. Well, that hip is going to keep reaching further forward. The hip, once again, that leg is still pretty much just hanging down here. So that hip is going to keep rotating just a little bit more. We're going to get a nice big weight, essentially just taking this pendulum of a leg that's swinging underneath and just easing in before it's going to change direction in just a little bit here. Same thing with our translations. We've already done the Z and Y, getting the character forward and up. And the hips in this case are going to still favor the supporting leg. So they're still just easing in over that supporting leg right there. Now I think I can push this up a little bit further. And I will exaggerate. So this is where you can exaggerate a little bit, that foot roll, to get that leg a little higher and those hips just a little higher. But not by much. So we get that. Okay. And then once again, the spine just reverses what the hips are doing. So if that leg keeps going forward, this is going to keep going forward here. And we're going to get, here's a tiny little bend this way. Now, I'm probably going to be over-exaggerating the spine motion here. The character is going to be doing this. I'm going to tone that down a lot once I get into the other poses. Okay. So we've got that. Now, we just need to go into the... Actually, let's do the arms here first because we are posing out the arms at least a little bit for now. So we're going to get this a little bit further here. So we've got that. Now, we can go in and we're going to go back to our contact pose. So we're back to the beginning. Just a flipped beginning. Now, there's a few different ways you can approach the contact pose here. Essentially, you can just make a new contact pose. Just repose the whole character. Done. You're good to go. Or, since we already had a contact pose that we spent some time on, we can take this and essentially just reverse the pose and put it into place where we have it later on. So that is my typical preferred method, just because it saves a little bit of time. Now, we're not trying to copy it exactly and just mirror it exactly. That's not really necessary, but it can be useful to at least give us a starting point. The reason I don't want to mirror it perfectly most of the time is then you're going to feel that. It feels like the walk is just a 12-frame cycle that mirrors and flips. I'd rather have slight differences in each step, so that way it feels more like a natural walk because we tend to favor one leg more than the other when we walk. So to do this, I'm just going to take frame 1, move it here to frame 13. So I go to frame 1, middle mouse drag to frame 13, hit S to set a key. And let's actually move these PVs further out here. So now you'll notice that that walk reverts back. How do we keep it from reverting back here? Well, essentially, we just need to know where our foot is going to contact right here. So let's go through this super quick. So this foot is now going to be the contact foot right there. So right there is going to contact. And actually, let me do it this way, just so it's going to be easier to show, because the way I'm doing it here might not be the clearest visually to explain it. So I'm going to copy this here, like so. And let's get that foot contacting first. So I'm going to zero out the rotations. And then I'm going to bring that foot down onto the ground and then bring it forward somewhere around there. And here we have our contact pose right there. Okay. So with this our contact pose, I need to bring everything else kind of forward, and I already have this pose that works. So once again, I can just take all of this and I'm going to deselect her left leg, the one that's contacting here. I'm just going to middle mouse drag and set a key hook right there. And now we get this. The body slides back, but that foot is still forward and in position. So what I can do now is just grab everything else and bring it forward. So just take those, bring that forward, and make sure those knees don't break there. Now this foot, pretty simple. It's still on the ground here. So I can just take the foot position here, copy it over to frame 13, whoop, like that, and just raise the foot roll, like so. So now we've got that step pretty much in place, ready to go. The only problem is the whole body is reversed. So you'll notice that the hips are actually rotated the wrong direction. They are opposite. This hip should be further back and it's reversed. Well, that's actually pretty simple to fix. All I need to do is look through my attributes and put a negative or remove a negative. So what I mean by that is the rotate Y here needs to go the other direction. Take my rotate Y and I'll just go negative 12.4. Boop, right there. Now the rotate Z needs to go the other way. Okay. Oh, it's negative. Let's remove that. Boop. There you go. I flipped it. The translations, the forward translation is fine. I just have that walk going forward. The side to side though, that needs to be reversed. She needs to be favoring her other side over here. So take my translate X, just add a negative to that. Boop. She's on the other side. Y and Z are good. I can look at my spine here. Once again, I know that my rotate Y and my rotate Z need to be reversed. So I can just take that, remove those negatives. There we go. There's the spine in place. And then I would do the same for the head. If I had animation for that, again, I'm not going to worry about the head right now. And then for the arms are just going to be kind of flipped around this way. So something like that. So there we go. We got that contact pose. And you can see it didn't take all that long. Essentially, I just needed to copy my first pose and then flip some things around. And now I'm pretty much good to go. I think my down pose is a little too low. So I'm going to bring this up here. It's starting to look a little cartoony. There we go. So we've got that in place right there. Now, a lot of it is not going to be quite correct, but this first pass is essentially trying to put in the overall structure, so then I can go in and refine it. So we've got the hips going over. On the contact pose, it starts to come back in right here. It's starting to go screen right again as it's shifting onto the contact leg, but it's not crossing over. It is not doing this and putting the weight on that contact foot because that foot is just touching the ground. It hasn't done anything yet. So we're just starting to move in that direction. And then on the down pose, we're going to go right across and swing across. And that's going to get that nice, beautiful weight shift in there. So we've got that in there. So that's really our contact pose right there. From there, we can just go back and keep doing all of our other poses. So at this point is the same thing. So I'm going to do a quick, and the VOD releases, I think it's like the moment that the stream ends, the VOD is available. Maybe there's a little bit of encoding time afterwards, but I think it's like pretty much instantaneous afterwards. And thanks for the reminders to drink. I think I forgot a few, so I'm going to take a few sips. And yeah, Animated Dogus, you can come back to this tomorrow or whenever you need. You can play it at double speed, which is really nice because I know I take a long time to explain things. So you can play the recording at double speed, rewatch only certain parts, skip to when I'm actually doing something. It's really nice. Definitely if you prefer to check out the VODs, don't feel bad about doing that. I understand that, especially like it's 2 hours and I've gotten one step in place. Haha. So, and let's see, can I make a demo about different types of run cycles? So cartoony runs, realistic, anime. Yeah, I did do a run demo a while back, but I could do a demo. I should do a demo on different types of walks and different types of runs. That would be an interesting couple of demos to do. Yeah, I'll have to think about the best way to do that, because as you can see, animating it takes a while. I might just either animate a bunch of different ones and explain the differences, or maybe even just find some references in animation and we can analyze them. What makes them different and what creates that feeling in each one. Okay, so we've got our contact pose here. Let's go back down to our down pose. So once again, down pose, foot flat, other foot starts to come up, hips down and forward, and they're gonna go shift over onto the other side right there. So you get that big swoop right in there. From there, the hips switch their rotation as well, start to go forward, spine counters the hips here, starts to straighten out. I'm getting a little bit of a pop right there. That's just my translation going too far. Okay. There's a little bit of a pop. I'm just going to have to drag the body a little bit there. Essentially, I'm rotating the body too much and it's creating this kind of pop over onto the side. Okay, so we've got that. And then once again, I can start bringing the arms back if I wanted to. I'm just doing this super roughly here. Okay, so that's pretty much that. Now we go into the passing pose. Now, this is probably one of my I don't want to say favorite, but one of the poses I feel are the most important, the second passing pose. The reason why this is so important is because it's going to determine a lot of elements of this walk. So as I'm posing this out, we zero out the foot when it's in the air, get that nice push off, make sure that the foot is angled, that it is translating out a little bit as well. And we want to get that passing moment right in here. So we get that. Once again, let's just get those hips. Oops, wrong control here. The hips need to be on the other side at this point. So leading with that. Push a little bit more weight into that hip there. Translate X a little to the side. Translate Z, I want that forward lean. And the slight bend in the knees here. Okay, so before we get into the spine even, why is this second pose so important? The reason it's important is, once again, the passing poses are what I call the linchpin poses. They are the poses that determine the rest of the walk and the speed of the walk, especially for a vanilla walk. Most walks tend to be very linear. When you're walking, you're not speeding up and slowing down each step. You walk at a pretty constant rate. So the way we determine that rate is using the passing poses, because these are very specific. We need that forward lean of the body, and the knee has to be either straight or slightly bent. You're very rarely going to get a super bend in a passing pose unless it's a very cartoony walk. If you look at any of the other poses, for example, the down pose here, honestly, as long as the hips are down, that's the only criteria. The hips could be a little bit further back, a little bit further forward. As long as they're down, that's all I need. Same thing with the contact. I could push this hip slightly more forward and then up and adjust the foot to get that knee bent. I could do all sorts of things to refine that pose, but I can move the hips up and down, left and right. I have a lot of range. This, I don't have a lot of range. It has to be at that angle, and the leg has to be straight. And that foot is flat on the ground as well, so I don't even have the ability to rotate that to adjust the knee. I'm very limited on this, which is good, because essentially what this means is I can now go into my graph editor right here, and I can find both my passing poses. So these are my two passing poses right here. These are, once again, the linchpin poses. I'm going to just put my marker here so it's easy to see them. What I can do to figure out how fast my walk should run, or how fast my walk should go, is take this entire curve, put into linear mode, and essentially just make sure that it's a straight line between all my passing poses, like that. So if this is a straight line here and goes all the way through, I can just add back in all my keys, like so. And that is essentially my forward translation right there. So I use my passing poses, these two, and it gave me the speed of the character, and now I'm not going to have this fast and slow motion. Now this does mean that I'm going to have to go back and readjust some of these poses slightly, but honestly it actually looks like I'm pretty darn good for most of these. And now I've got that nice translation forward. Beautiful. Now, does it have to be perfectly linear? No, because we are not robots. We do have some natural offsets. So as I refine this, I can push that offset slightly, but at least I have a solid base to work from. And I'm not kind of guessing and then adjusting a ton of poses and hoping for the best. At this point, I know my Translate Z, my forward translation, is pretty much solid for the walk. So if anything else is feeling out of place, I know that most likely it's going to be my rotate Y, or sorry, my translate Y, one of my rotates, something else that needs to be fixed first. So once again, that's why I love the passing pose. It is a hugely helpful pose in determining how to move your walk and how to get that to read correctly. So that chest is going to flip here. We're going to get a little bit more rotation in the spine there. And then once again, the arms are going to go through right there. Okay. And I saw you never copy mirror poses when you do walk cycles. I will sometimes, but in this case, because I want to show the process, I want to actually show what you can do here. If you did want to mirror a pose, let's actually do that here. Let me take Animbot. It's the easiest way to do it here. And actually, is it going to load up for me? I might have to log into it. And I should also save. That would be a smart thing to do, because I haven't saved today. Okay, so let's say I want to mirror a pose. We can do that. So next pose here is going to be the up pose. So I can take the up pose that I have right here, copy that over to frame 22. Let's make sure I copy everything right there. And then once I have that, I can just hit the mirror button. It flipped it over like so. And let's double check that everything flipped correctly. I think it did. So now we've mirrored that, and I just need to move that pose forward. You can see how it's snapped backwards here. To do that, all I have to do is take the feet and the hips, go into the graph editor, look at my Translate Z, and let's see. There we go. Take my Translate Z and then just move this until the curves line up right there. So that's the foot that's staying still on the ground. I want that to be flat right there. So I just moved everything else up with it, and now there we go. So now we've got that. So now I can go to the next pose. Oh, and Tiki, I actually just answered your question. So to kind of reiterate, I typically copy the poses if I'm working on a faster project that I have a deadline on. But in this case, I wasn't copying it just because it's a little bit easier to show the process on everything. But if you do want to copy, once again, let me just show the process. There's many different ways of doing it, but what I can do is just, let's say I need my contact pose next. Well, actually, since we need the contact pose, I won't be able to copy it exactly like what we did before. So at this point, actually, our next pose is the contact pose, which is going to be our last pose. So all I need to do for the contact pose is take the first pose and use that. The reason I want to do that is I want to have a perfect cycle here. We're animating a walk cycle, not just a walk animation. So a walk cycle needs to cycle. It needs to loop properly, which means that your first pose and your last pose have to be exactly the same. Not just close, exactly the same. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my first key right here on frame 1, middle mouse drag that to frame 25 and hit S to set a key. Now, as we go through our walk, you'll notice that the character pops back to the start. Well, that's not good. That's not what we want. We want them to keep going forever, not loop back. So once again, there's a few different ways you can do this, but one of the simplest is just take your elements that are going forward. In this case, it's my cog and my IK feet. I'm going to go to my graph editor, select my translate Z, and just move my curves up here, boop, until the foot that is staying still. You can see it's staying still because the curve is flat right here. I'm just going to move that right there. Now it's flat and I'm done. So now that character keeps moving forward. Very nice. Done. No math or anything needed. Now let's double check our translate Z on the hips once again. Let's just go into linear. And now you can see, because I used that those passing poses to get my linchpin moments in there, I've essentially just got this nice, clean forward motion right through there. I know that I'm not going to have any slowdowns or weird hitches in the walk. From there, what I can also do is I'm going to take all my curves in my animation, select them here, go to curves, pre-infinity, cycle with offset, curves, post-infinity, cycle with offset. I'm also going to go to view and show infinity right here. And what this shows me is all of the curves repeating over and over and over. So now if we watch my character here, they will just walk forever. So they will just keep walking on and on and on for all eternity. Now, the reason this is helpful is that we want 3 curves to actually change throughout all of this animation. Once again, it's the cog, that forward translation of the cog, as well as the forward translation of the feet. And we can see here, those are those curves right there, those 3 curves going on forever. All your other curves should just go in a straight line. They shouldn't offset and change over time. If you do notice that, so for example, let's say on this last pose here, I'm going to take my hip control here, and I'm just going to offset the rotation right there in Z, just a little bit. It's not that much. You can see start frame here, end frame there, not a huge deal. But if I look at my curve here over time, you'll notice how over time it changes a lot. That curve should be cycling and following a straight line as it oscillates. Instead, it's now going at a weird angle because I had one key that is slightly offset. That is bad. By the time it loops again, that character's hips are going to be breaking and twisting in the most horrible way. So, if ever you see this, what you need to do is make sure that your first and last key match. So, I'm going to take frame 1, middle mouse drag that to frame 25, set a key. There we go. The infinity keys is going to help you make sure that you have a perfect cycle. So, with that, we now have our walk cycle. And just for the sake of demo here, I'm going to put this in step mode. It's going to be easier to see right there. So let's just see what we've got so far. It's not going to be perfect, but it's the base once again. So we have this, and looks like I actually, something isn't offset here. So you can see how my walk is actually pretty good here, and then something is missing here. What's going on? Let me double check. Set a key on everything. Okay. Let's see. So if this happens, it's just a matter of essentially detective work. We've got our first pose going through here, the walk cycle, but then you can see on the second walk cycle, it's like we're missing our ups and downs. The translate Y here, if I watch the hips, the character is just kind of doing this. My translate Y isn't looping for some reason. Let's see that out. Ah, right there. See, it's not cycling. So for some reason, when I selected everything, it didn't select everything. So I'll just do that again. I'll once again select all my controls, select all my keys, go to curves, post infinity, cycle with offset, curves pre-infinity, cycle with offset. Now, let's see how that feels. There we go. Is it perfect? No, but it's, yeah, there we go. Now it's looping properly. There we go. So if you ever run into that, it's just a matter of detective work. Now, what happens with the knee tangents as it goes on? That's a very good question. So you'll notice that the knee tangents are, or the PVs, those points in front of the knees, are just bouncing back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to have to clean that up. Overall, they're not going to be changing much, so I just need to keep them ahead of the knees. Essentially, as I was blocking it in, I just put them ahead of there so I don't have to think about them. They're just there and they can do their own thing. But as I keep animating this, I want this to actually stay ahead and not reset back to their default position. How do I do that? Well, essentially, I can just simplify my animation here on those knees. So right now, the translate Z on both of these, you can see how it's oscillating right here. What I really need is for those knee PVs to have a consistent distance between the character and the knees. So, for example, if we look at this foot here, this back foot has a translate Z of 0. Okay. The knee PVs here, I'll simplify this and we'll put this at 300. So these knee PVs are 300 units ahead of that back foot right there. So here, if this is 92.993 right there, well, this should be 392.993 right there. And now you'll see my curve goes into infinity and just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. Done. So essentially, I just made sure that that difference is the same on the first and the last key. And now I've got that animation that'll just go on into infinity and it's not going to catch up to the body. Now in the middle here, you'll notice that the keys are just a mess. Ugh. Well, let's simplify this. I'm going to set this to linear mode right there, and then just delete the keys in the middle. So now we just have a very basic curve, like so. And then I can just go back in and insert the keys back into the shot. So there. I think that's on, oops, 22. Need every 3 frames. So I'm just going to hold down I, middle mouse click on those curves. Doot, 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 doot. There we go. And then I can set this back into step mode. And now those knees are just going forward, nice and cleanly. They just go forward. And honestly, the only reason I put keys in there is so that the knees don't catch up to them and then it snaps forward again. So there we go. We've got that cleaned up, nice and clean. And again, I didn't have to put much thought into that. That's the ideal here, is that we're trying to do things in a way that we're not having to put a ton of brain power into every single tiny thing. Now, how would you animate a walk run cycle for an animated film? Would you do a cog cycle when the character stays in one place and then move it with a cog? Or would you animate it like you are doing right now? If the character needs to turn 90 degrees, how would you do that with a cycle? It all depends on the production. Some productions, you will animate walk cycles going forward like I'm doing here. Other times you'll do a treadmill walk where they walk in place. Video games are almost always treadmill walks that you actually have to have whether you animate it as a treadmill walk or whether you animate it moving forward, the final result has to be exported into the game engine as a treadmill walk, walking in place without moving forward. So honestly, it just depends on the production, whatever they need. Personally, I tend to prefer treadmill walks nowadays just because it's a little simpler in certain ways to do the cycles. Now, in terms of animating the character turning 90 degrees, there's a lot of different ways you would approach that. Typically, in a game engine, it's going to be a connection of a bunch of different animations that layer on top of each other. So you're going to have your walk cycle, and then your run cycle, and then you're going to have a turn animation, and then you're going to have a bunch of other small animations depending on how fast the character is turning, and all of them layer on top of each other to create that turn. You can have a lot of animations just for one simple motion in a game. For a feature film, it really depends on the pipeline. Sometimes what you'll end up doing is you take your walk cycle, you constrain it onto a path, so your character is just walking along a path, and then you'll just take that and then refine the steps to make sure that the character is actually stepping in the right spot at the right time. But it's just essentially you've got your walk cycle, it's following a path, you can walk around a corner, and then you'll just make sure the feet don't slip and slide in certain spots, and then that's it. But it's just using that base walk cycle to start with. So hopefully that answers the question there. So with that, let's go through here and refine the walk. So right now we've got the base, but you can see it's poppy. The head's kind of wiggling around. It's not great. So how do we clean this up? Well, first of all, let's just double check our key poses. Contact, down, passing. I'm just going to make sure that everything is correct. So for example, making sure that this body is leaning forward here. I almost feel like I could push that a little bit more. And hey, thank you so much, Justoni. Thank you so much for the subscription. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Also, hello. So I almost feel like the translate Z here on this passing pose could be pushed forward a little bit more. I kind of prefer that one there. This one feels a little back in comparison. So I'm going to take that translate Z, just nudge it forward here a little bit. Make sure we can see it. And make sure my keyboard is set to the right language. The joy of having a multilingual keyboard. You accidentally switch a language and don't realize it. Okay. So, let's again go to the translate Z, move it forward slightly. Now that's going to affect my overall motion here. So once again, I can set that to linear mode. I'm just going to delete the extra keys here and then get this straighter right through there. Now, do you have to do that? No, not at all. But at least for me, I find it makes it helpful to make sure that I'm not starting from a place of, or how to put this, that I just have a solid base essentially. So we need 13, 16, 22. There we go. So now we've got that forward translation going through there, and then let's set this back into step mode. Right there. So now There we go. We've got that. Let's look at my other poses, make sure nothing's feeling out of place. This contact pose, yeah, that's definitely a little too far forward. So I'm going to bring that back here. And this is where now we can start to offset things to make sure it works for this moment. This is good. I think I need to bring this up slightly. So I'm doing a second pass on my key poses here, just to make sure that they are correct. Okay. Okay, good. So that's pretty solid overall there. Now, let's actually just refine the different elements. The first thing is going to be the side to side of the walk. So I want to make sure that side to side is working really well. The graph editor is going to be our friend here. So I'm going to look at the translate Z, and there's going to be two elements that we want here. We want the big transition that's going from one side to the other, from one leg to the other, to happen between the contact and the down pose. So right here, you'll notice that if we look at the graph editor, we have our 0 line right there. That is essentially what you can kind of consider one side to the other. That is the neutral point here. So if our keys go from one side of that 0 onto the other, we've switched sides. So we need to have that big transition across there. The next thing that needs to happen is that we need to ease in and out of the extremes. So think of it like a pendulum, where you have a character swing across, hold, and then swing across, hold. So we're using that pendulum principle, or you can also think of it like the hang time of a bouncing ball, and we're using that to build in our extremes. Now, if we look here, we can definitely see that that is easing in pretty well right there. It's easing in, and then it comes back out here. Now, this is going out a little fast. I feel like it's kind of popping. So what I might do is actually have the hips start to switch back here. So we're going from contact, down, passing, and then on the up pose, I'm starting to turn back around so that the hips can kind of come back here. And then right through here, now we're popping right there. See here how the hips on the up pose are going up again? They should be coming back down. So our other up pose here, let's look at the values. This is negative 2.6. Here we're at 3.3. Let's actually bring this down to about 2.6. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then match our other curves to kind of get the same feeling right in there. So something like that. So now we get that nice transition right through here, comes through, swings across. So now if we look at that side to side motion here, see how that feels just a little bit better? And we get a nice swing. I've just gone through and I'm cleaning up my curves here in the graph editor. And it might be a little too much. There's a lot of swinging side to side here. If I feel like that's the case, I can just take my curves and scale it down. Make it a little smaller, a little bit more refined right there. And for some reason, once again, it didn't cycle. See here how my curve isn't cycling? So let me actually just take all of these. Once again, cycle with offset. Let's double check that it actually did it this time. Okay, good. There we go. So now we've got that rhythm in the hips there. Okay. So with that, let's take a look at our translate Y. Our translate Z is pretty much done. We've already checked that. Translate Y, this is the up and down. The big change here is going to be as the character comes down, there should be a big drop, and then they push up, and we should get that kind of bouncing ball hang time once again between the passing, the up pose, and then the contact. We want that little bit of hang time right through there. And it looks like I've already got that pretty solid right here. I think overall, this is working pretty well. So my up poses, at least for now, or my translate Y, I should say, working really well. Now, let's get the rotations in there. So you can see it's just checking one thing at a time and making sure that it's working the way you want it to. But all of that depends on having that solid base to work off of. So now we're looking at our rotate X. If you remember, we shouldn't really have any rotate X on that hip control. It's not necessary. But because of the way Maya works and the manipulator, sometimes you can start to get just random numbers in there. So here we have some motion on the rotate X. I'm just going to come through here and zero it out. We don't need it. It's not going to do anything for us. So let's just remove that for now. There we go. Clean that up. Now let's do the rotate Y. So the rotate Y is the twist this way. And essentially what it's going to be is, once again, a pendulum or a bouncing ball. We would need that hang time. The character is going to swing across, fold, swing across, fold. It's just that. It's just a bouncing ball, ease in, ease out, like you would have at the peak of a bounce there. So as we look at this here, we have the pose there. It's easing here. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that's a good one. On the rotate Y, the most extreme pose, where it's going to be the most rotated, is the contact pose. That's when the legs are reaching their furthest. Now, if you look at this here, my up pose right here is actually higher than my contact pose. This needs to be brought down right there. So look for my other contact pose here. Once again, this is my contact pose. That should be the most extreme pose. So I'm going to bring those down like so. And then let's just make sure, okay, good. Those are about the same. So from there, I can just ease in and out of that rotation. And I want to make sure that the passing pose right here is where we feel that switch. So from the down pose here to the passing pose here, I want to have this cross the line. Once again, that zero line. It's going to the other side. So we're going to have that cross over, ease in, go across, something like that, ease in. So something like that. I think I can maybe tone this down just a little bit. Okay. So we've got that. There you go. That's my rotate Y. Rotate Z. So that's the angle this way. Once again, the biggest change is going to be the contact to the down. That's where we have that big switch over and the most amount of rotation happening. From there, it's just going to ease in, ease out, and then switch across. So overall, this is looking pretty good. We've got our contact. It switches to the down pose, eases in right here. We start to reach forward on that contact pose. So once again, this is the contact right here. It's starting to change direction, which is good. As the leg reaches out, it's going to pull down on that hip. So even though the contact isn't changing yet, it's going to be sympathetically pulling that hip down. And then on the down pose, we sweep across there and then ease in here. I think I'm going to exaggerate that ease just a little bit more. It feels like it's holding a little too much. So more like that. Okay, so that rotation is working pretty well. I still feel like there's a little too much translate X on the hips here if I'm watching it. Let's take my translate X. Once again, I'm just going to scale it down. Let's do about half. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, maybe a little bit more. So from there, we go into the spine. The spine is going to be the same thing as the hips pretty much. So first off, I don't want any rotate X. I'm just going to take all of that, zero it out. Don't need it. There we go. Now rotate Y. Once again, it's just going to follow the opposite of what the legs are doing in this case. And it's just going to ease in, ease out. So here we have our most extreme, which is going to be the contact. It's going to be there. And then where's our next contact? Right here. So these two should be our most extreme. And I definitely see that that is not happening there. So let me tweak that right through here. And then it's just going to ease out. And then we'll have that passing moment on the passing pose. It's just not going to be as extreme as the hips, because the hips are leading the action. So we want the shoulders to kind of follow, but not exactly the same amount. So something along these lines. I could exaggerate that ease in, ease out just a little bit more. So I'm trying to imagine the curves so we get that nice flow through there. So now if I watch that rotation of the body, that's working a little bit better. There is definitely something going on with the rotate Z. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, there's a big pop right there. So rotate Z, same thing as the hips. The big change is going to be from here to here, from the contact to the down. The difference though is because the hips are being affected by the leg. It's essentially the leg pushing into the hip and causing it to rotate. It's going to be pretty violent, for lack of a better term. It's going to move very quickly. The shoulders are countering that motion. It's going to be much softer. So I can make this transition not go quite as fast here. And what that's going to help do is avoid that head snapping over to the side in this moment. So let's take that. Once again, find my extremes. So in this, the extreme is probably going to be the up pose. Yeah, probably the up pose. Okay. Yeah, up pose there. And then up pose here. What are my values? So 0.46, 0.68. Let's go a little bit higher. So the reason I'm double checking is just to make sure that I don't have one side that's kind of limping along. And then these need to come down here. The head has a little weird wiggle to it. Okay. Let's see. So contact down, we get the reversal. Contact down, get that reversal. Okay. So let's see how this feels. Much better already. If we just watch the neck, not the head. The head's got a weird wiggle in it. So we've got that in place. Okay. So from there, we need to get the head in place. Let's just do that super quick. Now, the head overall is going to follow what the body is doing. So there's a few quick ways we can get this in place. Let's actually zero out the rotate X. And let's just do our rotate Y pass first. So essentially, it's just following what the body is doing. So I can just kind of follow the angle here and get that to match slightly, like so, and then scale it in. I could, if I wanted to, select one of the rotations for the spine and the head. Look at my rotate Y. So let me make sure I have that. And then the head. Rotate Y. And I'm just going to make sure that my spine animation here matches my head animation. So I can just kind of match that one-to-one there. Or if I really want to work very efficiently, I can just take my spine animation, copy that, go to my head animation, rotate Y. I'm going to delete the keys on the head for the rotate Y. And then just go to edit, paste, and there we have it. There's my body rotation applied to my head. And let's double check that that's correct. Looks, did it not copy the right one? Wait, did I grab the wrong control? Oh, no, that is correct. It's because the spine has 3 controls that are all moving, so that's why it would rotate more. So you can see here, now it's following with the body. If we look at it from the front view, you can see that a little bit more clearly. Like that. There we go. All we would need to do now is take that head motion and scale it down. So let's just make that super subtle. Okay. Now, same thing with the rotate Z, the tilting here. I can just take that, copy that, take my head animation, and paste. Right through there. Now, the head is going to tilt with the body. And I can just scale that down. Thought I heard something. Oh, did I hear something? I think I might have guessed. Let me double check something. Nope. Let's see, I thought there was someone right behind me. It's a Halloween stream, apparently. Let's see. Now, for characters who don't have eye controls, like Stella or Stuart, do you think we should keep their nose facing forward to rotate with the body? The nose should face towards where they're walking. Even if they don't have eyes, you don't want this to happen. They're going to do this, and their nose is going to be pointing towards where they walk. It's just going to be that subtle connection to the body. So it doesn't really matter whether they have eyes or not. There was definitely a squeak. Okay, you did hear that. That's what I heard. There was like this squeak sound. It's like, what the heck? What's going on over there? So with that, just by copying that animation, we now have that head working with the body here. And make sure I don't break my shot by having my keyboard in the wrong language once again. So if we look at this here, you can see that front view, we get that connection with the body. And then later on, we can offset that. Pikachu's behind me. They're staring at me. At least I've got Nurse Joy there to help me after the attack. So one thing I'm feeling here is that the chest is definitely rotating too much. Just looking at it from the front screen here, the chest is going to be just a small adjustment compared to the hips. So I'm just going to take the torso here, take my rotate Y, and scale it. Now, the other thing I'm noticing is it looks like I might have missed some controls here and there, or I didn't polish all of them. So I'm going to make sure this can happen when you're animating. You're working on certain controls and then some of them don't get polished correctly. So what I'm going to do here is figure out which control is the correct one. So extreme, ease in, switch over. Okay, I think this one's the correct one. I'm going to copy that. Take my other 2 spine controls, rotate Y, and paste that. So rotate Y, edit, paste. There we go. So now if I take my whole spine here, they should all match. There we go. Now from there, I can just scale my spine controls down. Let's go about halfway. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. So we've got that. So from there, what else do we have? Well, we've looked at the body for the most part, but there's something that I didn't look at, which is the feet. And you'll notice that there's something going on with the feet, which is that there's a little bit of a slide right here. Boink. That foot slides in. Why? Because I just forgot to slide in as the foot arced outwards. That happens. There are going to be times when you forget to move something. Luckily, it's an easy fix. All I need to do is look at my translate X of this foot here. So it goes out right there. So you can see it's on the ground. It goes outwards, comes back in. This is the contact pose. It should just be down back at this point right there. So this whole section right here, up until, yeah, this whole section right here should just be there. Done. Fixed. Right there. Now, there's a little bit of a rotation happening here in Y. So let me look at that. Oh, I did see something. Give me 1 second. There we go. A little intruder. So this is Specs. Cameron and I ended up adopting a few kittens over the winter break. And they're not supposed to be here because they like to chew on wires. But he somehow found his way in. So I'm going to have to go put him out back into the other room. But yes, Specs. Hello. There's a microphone. I don't know if you can hear him purring. But yeah, let me put him off to the side here. There we go. One day there's going to be like a cat bed here so they can sit in the background. But that'll happen once he stops chewing on wires. And he's still trying to get in. But yes, Specs. One of the new additions to the household. Yeah, he has so many weird little stripes on his back. It's just, I've never had a cat that had such a weird stripe pattern. But let's see, where were we? Okay, the feet. There's a little bit of a weird rotate Y happening right here. It just kind of spins. Don't need that. So I can just copy the key before it, paste it there, done. So this is just a general good thing to do when you're cleaning up your feet, is look for any weird rotations, translations. When the foot's on the ground and not moving, those curves should be flat. So let's check the other foot here. This is good. 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 He's chewing at the door. I can hear him. See, okay, we adopted kittens. What are the names of the others? It's Specs, Nix, Tawny, and then Tigri, which is French for little gray. We adopted 4 kittens. That's too many cats. Essentially, there was a farmer nearby who had cats, and he had a cat who had kittens, and he's kind of an old school farmer, the kind where it's like, oh, I've got extra cats, I'm just gonna get rid of them, like, and not send them to the pound to get rid of them, send them to be adopted, get rid of them. No, to like the terminal, get rid of them. And we went, no, don't do that. We're gonna take them and we're gonna find a home for them. And now we've fallen in love with them and we can't separate them. So now we've got 4 cats. So yeah, he's still trying to chew his way through. I hear him. I've got a gate there to keep them out, and I can hear him chewing on it. So we've got that walk there. The feet are working pretty well for now. Honestly, in this stage, the feet aren't going to be doing anything too crazy. As long as I have the main arc, that's the important bit. And I feel like I have that right there. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Tom. He is just chewing at that door. So, let's see. What else am I missing here? I think from the front view, there was something that I was noticing, which is that the upper spine. So let's just look at... So this is actually something I like to do whenever I'm analyzing walks. Just frame up your character so you can only see one part of the character. So if I look at the hips here, that actually looks pretty good. I'm feeling like that's pretty solid. I do feel like there's a little bit of a pop going here in the knee, but that's not too bad. Essentially, all I would need to do is take the PV and move it out slightly, but I might save that for when we go into splines, because part of it is also this foot pose right here and trying to exaggerate the push off into that foot pose. I think if anything, what I can do is take this and just nudge it out a little bit further right there. Okay, so we've got that. The hips are feeling pretty good overall. Okay, let's focus on the upper body. Overall, that's feeling pretty good. Now, the thing that I'm feeling here is that the upper body feels too perfect. If I look at the spacing at the top of the head, see how it just kind of feels like it's almost linear, back and forth, back and forth. The other thing that I'm feeling is it's too perfectly connected to the hips. Like I was saying earlier, we want those hips to lead the action in this case. So like when we have this big motion here, I want those hips to be the thing that drag the body over. So I'm just going to take that rotate Z here. I'm going to drag it back a little bit right through here. So that as we go from here to here, see how the head is now dragging slightly? And then we can kind of push it over here. So we're just going to adjust the curve so that it kind of has that overlap. Did they get through again? I don't know if you can hear the squeaks. He went from chewing on the door to begging to be let in. Okay, so from the contact to the down, we get that drag. From the contact to the down, we get the drag. Then this is going to ease here, I think. He really wants in. Okay. And then we're going to ease out here. Okay. So right there, see how that now feels a little bit better? It's not quite right yet. I still need to adjust it, but now it doesn't feel like the body and the hips are just kind of doing the same thing, matching each other. I've got that drag. The hips are going to lead with that impact right there, and then it's going to drag the body over. Now what I'm feeling now is that the head is doing a little too much. It's almost too contrasting, where it feels like she's purposefully dragging her body over. So I'm going to try to tone that down here. So we're going to use our contacts as our extremes. Right there. And let's bring this down here. Actually, just a little bit past like that. Let's see how this feels. a little bit better. I'll have to copy the head. So now the head is no longer matching the body, but that's fine. I'm just focused on the body right now. So we've got that in place now. So you can see how I built in the base animation, and now with the base animation, I'm kind of going in and just refining to get a better feel for this. And this, there's not really like a specific rule set that you have to use for something like this. A lot of times it's just what feels good and what works for this walk in this moment and this character. Now, I also feel like this is maybe just a bit too much, so I'm going to tone this down quite a bit here. See how that feels. Yeah, maybe that's a little too much. I want to feel it more than I see it, essentially. Okay, so with that, I can now just take this curve here. I'm going to copy that, and then we'll paste that on the head. You could just animate it manually as well, but especially for things that are sympathetic to each other, copying curves just works a little faster because it's pretty much the same thing anyway. So let's look at it from the front view there. And I think I can maybe scale that up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So with that, let me actually save here. We have the basics of the walk. Now, I still need, oh, and my camera froze. No, the cat, he hijacked my stream. Of course, it's on the pose where I'm like doing some weird hand pose to my face. Now, Isa, you mentioned, are the fingers phasing through the leg or do you pose them to slide along? I haven't done the doors. I'm reading the next line. I haven't done the fingers and the arms yet because I wanted to get that body in place first. The arms, I kind of started moving them, but everything depends on what the body's doing. If I move the body and change what's happening in the body, the arms are going to be totally redone anyway. So I kind of got them in a rough position, but I didn't really care about exactly what they were doing. At this point, now I can go in and build that up. Now, actually, before I do that, I also want to add the rotate X to the head. That's going to help a lot. So once again, rotate X on the head is just this. So just do this, relax your wrist, and you're going to have the head overlap. So as the hips go up, the head drags down. As the head starts to come across, or as the hips ease, the head comes up, drags, and then we get that overlap and bounce in there. So on the contact, the head is going to be slightly up here. I'm going to over animate this. And then on the down pose, so contact, down, head is still going to be kind of up, then passing, the head's going to come down, up pose, still slightly down, contact, starts to drag up. Something like that. Let's see. So up, gets dragged over there. Okay, so I can just take a look at my rotate X now and just finish the cycle. So pushes up. It's going to start to straighten out. Down. Starts to come down there. Drags. and then make sure that first and last key are matching. Oops, wrong key. Okay, cool. So I also need to make sure my extremes are about the same. Doesn't really matter, but so now we got that overlap in there, like so. Now it's a little much, especially if we look at the front view here. You can see she's just kind of bobbing her head quite a bit. We want to feel it more than we see it. So I'm going to scale this down. And then I'm also going to make sure that she's constantly looking slightly downwards here. So right now, once again, look at the 0 line. If your curve is going up and down below and above and below that line, it means she's looking up, then down, up, then down, up, then down. That's going to be a little weird. Normally when we're walking, we're looking down, not like at our feet, but towards the horizon, looking at the ground where we're going to be stepping. Unless you're like daydreaming, and then you'll be looking up in the air. So with this, I want her head to be constantly lower. So I'm not going to have it go past the 0 line here. And now I can have that overlap and just have that kind of constant look down there. And maybe scale it just a little bit more. I want to feel it more than I see it. So something like that. Now we have that overlap in the head right through there. At this point, let's get the arms in place. So I'm going to do one side here, and then I'll probably just mirror it over, just to simplify that. Now, do you pose your pose in blocking to represent the first frame of that pose specifically, or an average of the pose itself? I pose it... This is the way my brain thinks about it. I pose it where it needs to be. So if this is going to be the contact frame, I put the foot on the contact pose, and then I think of, okay, what's the rest of the body doing? Is it going to be dragging? Is it going to be overlapping? What's happening in that moment on everything else? And I just put it in that place where it should be. Is the arm swinging forward? Okay, put in that swinging forward position. All of that. What I don't want to have is, okay, on the contact pose, it's going to contact, and everything else is going to be just in a still pose at the most extreme. And no overlap, no nothing. Because it needs overlap. That overlap has to be built into the pose. Unless I'm doing a layered animation like with these arms where I didn't really pay attention to them, I just kind of moved them in place, but now I'm going to approach them again and really get the overlap. Unless I'm doing something like that, I'm trying to think of everything of how it's going to be overlapping and dragging and working with everything else. I hope that makes sense. And let's see. Can you explain about cleaning head arcs in acting shots or head turns and such? I heard you need to track the arc of the nose and arc of the chin, top of the head. I track the arc of the nose and fix the spacing, but the animation is not, it doesn't look okay. Something with the rotation Z and neck also affects and can't polish perfectly. It really just depends on the shot. Like in terms of advice, it depends on the shot. There's not one piece of advice that I can give that's going to help. It's just kind of, while you're checking for the arcs of the nose and all of those, it is important. That is very important. You want to look at those, but you don't want to lose track of the overall motion, of the lead and follow, of how the head is moving. So for example, if I'm get the perfect arc in my nose, whoop, like that, but I'm not thinking of the rotate Z and I'm not tracking all of those elements and not just looking at the overall motion, exactly, you'll lose the texture. It's just going to be sliding across. So for me, it is important to look at the overall arc of the nose and the spacing, but always also keep in mind the global motion. So think of, okay, he's in this pose, maybe he's doing a head turn. Is he going to lead with his chin? Does the chin lead and then does he dip down and then start to come up? Or maybe he leads with the top of his head and then comes across. Think of those larger elements and keep those in mind. It's very easy to start losing those as you're starting to polish. Polish is there to help refine and make things shine a little bit more. We don't want to get so caught up in polish that we are essentially taking sandpaper to our entire shot and turning it into a blob. The way I was kind of taught it is think of like sculpting something. You make this beautiful wood sculpture, but there's a few nicks and scratches from your chisels and your tools. So you want to take some sandpaper to it. What you don't want to do is sandpaper down until you just have a lump of wood. You want to keep all those details that you built in, all the little motions and the cool texture. You're just trying to get rid of the little mistakes and the little wiggles where your hand might have shook a little bit as you tried to do a line. That's what we're trying to do. We're polishing it, not sanding it down to nothing. So I hope that helps. And what shortcut am I using to tone down the curves? All I'm doing is selecting the curve, selecting my scale tool, which is the R key in Maya, and then middle mouse dragging while holding down shift. And that just scales the curve based on where my cursor is located. So again, just hit the R key to scale your keys, W to move your keys. With that, let's get the arms in place here. So the arms, let's just do one side first. And then I can just copy it over just to save time because we are at 3 hours here. And I did say I've only got 3 hours, maybe 4. So I've got maybe an hour left unless I really push my deadlines back. So as we come through here, let's just focus on this arm right there. So it's going to be back here on the contact pose. Then it goes forward here, and I'm going to drag it back a little bit. I want that hang time, essentially. As that body drops forward, I want that arm to kind of drag slightly where we feel that elbow leading. Let's actually make this bigger so we can see. How do I want to show this? There's a lot of things I want to show all at once. And not enough screen space to do it. Okay, let's focus just on the arms here, and we just need to focus on the arm here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is as this starts to move forward, I want the elbow to drag back as it kind of stretches back, and the elbow leads the action. So this is that pendulum moment here, the successive breaking of joints. It's coming back here, and then from the front view, see how the body moves to the side here? I want to drag that arm slightly right there. So we feel like the hips are leading the action, the arm is dragging behind, and then it's going to swing out ever so slightly. So here on the passing pose, the arm is going to swing out, and I'm going to keep the arm slightly further back here. I want the leg to pass first, then the arms will pass, because once again, the arms are just swinging and penduluming across there. So we're going to do that. As it comes forward here, let's bring it back just a little bit right through there. And let's actually keep the elbow a little straighter here as well. And then the next contact pose, which is this my contact pose? Okay, something happened here. See how I've got a lot of bend in that knee? Something happened with my translations here. Something got moved. Strange. That's fine. It's easy to fix. So if I notice this here, the knee is bent on my passing pose. It could be that one of my rotations tweaked, one of the other things that I adjusted changed things. So I can just pull this back a little bit and kind of adjust things ever so slightly through there. Let's double check that the first pose didn't get adjusted too much. Okay. So down, up, passing, contact. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's better. Let's still, I feel like this could be exaggerated a little bit more. Okay. We can refine it later. Let's get that arm in position here. So, up pose. Normally I'd try to see more of this, but with just one monitor, it's kind of hard to get everything on screen that I would normally want to have. So there we go. It comes up into the contact pose right here. And then onto the down pose, I'm going to have that arm drag back. Let's exaggerate that just a little bit. Starts dragging, and then we have the passing pose here. Once again, I want to keep that a little bit delayed. Maybe that's too much. And then swing across here. And then we get to the first pose. Let's just copy what we had from frame 1. So something like this. I feel like that's a little too fast right here. So I'm going to pull that back. Now looking at the front view, we made sure to drag this back a little bit right through here. And then it's going to come out and around to go around the hips. Something like this. And then it's going to come back around and in. So it's kind of a figure 8 motion through here. So something like that. It's a little stiff right here. So I'm going to just drag this back a little bit. So we get a little bit more of that drag from the hips. Okay, so we've got that. That's the overall arc of the arm. That's pretty good right there. I don't want it to be too complex either. Now, as it's doing that, the arm, let's actually get rid of all the rotation on the wrists here, just to make sure we're not being influenced by anything here. Then I can adjust the wrist afterwards. Okay, so no rotation on the wrist. Let's see how that feels. It looks like I missed a key on the wrists. Oh wait, there's an extra key here. That would do it. Okay, so looking at this here, that's pretty good overall. Looking at it from the side view, the big thing that I want is some rotation in the arm. So it needs to be doing this as it goes across. Now I could add this right here, and that is going to be much more natural, or I could add it in the wrist as well. I'm going to try to add it in the shoulder first, just because that's essentially where we're going to see that in real life. So essentially, I'll find my extremes, the beginning and the end here, and just add that rotate X in there. So I know where my highest and lowest points are right there. And actually this would probably be my lowest point right here. So from there, I can just ease in and out from those points. So something like that. So this is actually a workflow that I like to use quite often, is just find your extremes on poses. Where do you want the rotation? Where do you want the whatever it is to happen most? And then just work from there. Okay, and then from here, this is gonna stay rotated there a little bit before going around. There we go. Now we get that nice arc in the hands very slightly, and our spacing is working pretty good overall. Let's just double check our other rotations, make sure nothing's feeling a little off. It's always good to double check. Try to polish things if you can. We're not trying to remove the texture to things. We're just trying to make sure that the curves actually make sense. So for example here, you see how the curve bounces right here? I could try to clean that up and just go like so. But is that the best course? Because I do want that drag in the hand right here. And overall, that is still working. So I can clean that up like that. So there we go. There's the arc of the arm. From there, I can add the overlap in the elbow a little bit more in depth right here, and let's exaggerate things a little bit. So as her arm comes forward, we straighten the elbow. It's going to stay pretty straight here before it starts to bend. And then right here, it's going to speed up in the bend. As her elbow stops moving forward, her arm slows to a swing, her lower arm will swing across. This is the pendulum. And then kind of come through right there. We can even drag that a little bit more here. And then maybe not quite as big a snap right in there. I think this can start to straighten out just a little bit more. The arm does have quite a bit of weight to it, so it's not like it's going to be dragging a ton here. Okay, so something like that. I do feel like my rotation back here is a little linear, so I'm going to bring this forward just a little bit more. There we go. So from there, we now need to just add a little bit of overlap on the wrist. So for the wrist, the main overlap is going to happen this way towards the pinky side. So I'm just going to kind of drag that across here, just using that rotate Y. And essentially what I'm looking for is a straight line on the front edge and a bend on the back right here. And now as it comes back, we're just gonna have the smallest adjustment here. Do not do this. That would break your wrist right there. We want just a little bit of straightening in there, but that's about it. Otherwise, you will literally break your wrist if you were to do that. So there we go. We've got that little bit of overlap right there. Now from the front view, we can add just a little bit of drag in that wrist. Just a little. I'm not trying to add a ton because our hands are not flopping around when we walk. Just enough to feel it. Okay. Something like that. There we go. So there's the overlap on the wrist there. Shatter, destroy it. Yes. Technically we can if we wanted to. If we really wanted to exaggerate, there's not a problem with breaking things. The big thing is, what is the goal of the assignment in this case? Now, with that, let's actually get the clavicle in here. Once again, I'm just going to zero everything out just because it's going to be easier to build it from scratch versus trying to work with what I had before, now that I've redone the arm. So the clavicle is very easy. If the arm goes back, clavicle goes back, and if the arm goes up, it's rotating up, the clavicle will be up slightly. Now here, let's actually go to the extremes. So this is going to be down, probably at its lowest, and it's probably going to be just slightly forward here. And then here is going to be probably the highest point on the clavicle and the most forward right there. So with that, so this is going to be my Z and Y. So let's look at the Y. This is the forward back motion. So we know where our extremes are going to be. So from there, all I need to do is ease in and out from those. And thank you so much, Sleep Deprived. Thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. That shocked me. I was in the graph editor here. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. So I found my extremes, and then I'm just easing in and out from there because I know that the arm is essentially easing in and out from that point. And then we can just copy the first frame to the last one here. And then once again, just ease in and out from there. Find the midpoint right around there. And there we go. Let's actually move the view up here so we can see that a little bit better. And something is not matching up, so let me just key that, make sure it's the same. Oh, and that's why I've got the rotate Y selected. So from there, let's do the rotate Z of the clavicle. And let's see. Rotate, yeah, Z. So Z is going to be the up and down. This first pose here is going to be up, but it's not going to be the highest point because we don't raise our shoulders up as high when we go backwards. So if I just look at my rotate Z here, that's pretty high there. Then this is going to be its lowest point right between these two. This is going to be the lowest point on those clavicles. And then from there, this is most likely going to be the highest point right there. Highest overall. Once again, from there, I can just ease in and out. So I'm actually going to change this here, ease through there. I might ease in just a little bit here, just to kind of show a little bit more weight in there, not have a pop. So something like that. And then as it swings back, we're going to have another low point here. And then it goes back up to the top right there. So we get this motion here. Now that's a lot. She is really swinging that arm. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to scale that whole thing down, make it a little bit more subtle. Once again, I'm just doing that by hitting the R key, holding down shift and middle mouse dragging through there. But now we have that overlap in the shoulder there. Done. So with that, we've got the arm in place and good to go. Now we need to do the other arm. If you're doing this without a plugin, I would recommend just get the practice, do this process again. It's good practice to get into, and then you can compare the two, see what's going on. It also helps to make the animation more organic. If you're like me and I'm on a deadline and I need to work fast and you've got a plugin that can help you mirror things, you can use that. So because I don't have too much more time, that's what I'm going to do here. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to just take all of my main controls here. I'm just going to delete the animation on them right there. So now we've got all of these zeroed out, and let's make sure the clavicle is also cleared out here. So I've got all of these that have pretty much nothing on them, and let's double check. Yeah, there's still something. Okay, bip, there we go. So now we've just got that arm that is T-posed out. And what I can do is select my current arm here, and I'm just going to use the mirror tool in Animbot. I'm going to mirror all the keys right there. Now we've got both arms, but they're doing the exact same thing. They're just swinging together. So what I can do now is, because I have infinity keys here, is an infinite cycle, all I need to do is take all my curves here and then offset them to be on the next cycle. So for example, this is the first contact right here. On the next contact there, that's when I want my arm to be in the start position. So make sure I select all my keys right there. Just move this off like that. So I just offset it by one cycle. And now, there we go. We've got the arms done. Nice and clean. So with that, let's see how our walk looks through this. There we go. So we've got our vanilla walk pretty much ready to be splined out. There's a few things that I'm feeling. One of them is the rotate Z on the hips. Looks like it got offset somehow. Let me double check here. So what I'm feeling is that there's an offset 8.5. No, it feels good. Strange. Maybe it's just a visual trick. I'll have to double check all my curves just to make sure. Essentially what it feels like is one side of the hips is kind of swaying a little bit more than the other. Technically they are here, just a little bit. Okay, so we've got that. Let's take a look here. What else are we missing here? Overall, it's working pretty well. I would reduce the finger pose that I have. I feel like she's doing a little bit too much of that. So I would bring in the fingers to be a little bit more relaxed. I also feel like my rotate X is hitting a little hard. It feels like she's kind of hitting and breaking her teeth a little bit right here. So let's look at that graph editor. Right here. down, drags. Comes down, over, like so. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, finger pose, but I'm not going to do that right now because that's not super important. Fingers, you'll notice that I am not doing any actual animation on the fingers. I got one pose in there, and then that's it. Fingers don't overlap during walks. You're not going to get this kind of motion in there. Fingers are controlled by the tendons, and the tendons in this case are relaxed and they're not doing anything. Let's see, do we have to add rotation X in hips during the walk? No. There is going to be a global rotation X, so I took the cog and I leaned her forward. And when we go into splines, we can add in a little overlap in there. But during the walk, you don't have to put that in early on here because it's so subtle that once you go into splines, you're probably going to end up having to redo it once you've cleaned up everything else. Essentially, you're going to have the tiniest little rotation like this in the spine during the walk, but that's it. Anything more, like if you start to see it at all, the character's going to look like they're doing this during the walk, and that's just going to look really weird. There's a reason why we have a spinal column, and it's to hold ourselves up. If we were to just kind of do this, the spine isn't doing its job. So you're going to focus more on the side-to-side rotation and the twist, not that forward back of the rotate X. So yeah, that would be the vanilla walk that we have right now. I do feel like my feet are slightly sticky. What's going on here? So what's making it feel sticky is the spacing here to here isn't going high enough. So I need to go blip right there. Really get those feet to push up and then shoot out. Same thing here. That foot roll is feeling a little linear, so I'm going to push this up here. Push this up there. Yeah, that's helpful. The heels were feeling like they were holding too long. I have no spine. I am jelly. So yeah, that would be the base vanilla walk. Now, when we go into splines, that's when we're going to get a lot more of the refinement, the foot arcs, the fine details of how the foot peels off and contacts the ground. We can really push the ease in and out of the hips as well as that flow. Right now, what we're more focused on is the overall global motion through the walk there. So yeah, trying to think if there's anything I'm missing here. There's definitely some knee wiggles here from the side view, but the knee isn't going to be super important until once again we go into splines. What's creating that knee wiggle right here is the fact that they go down, the knee is bent, and then the passing, it straightens up right here. So it creates the feeling of a little bit of a knee wiggle. That's not really a big issue right now. Once I go into splines, I'll be able to refine that even more and help to avoid that feeling in there. Yeah, that would be the vanilla walk blocking. So 3.5 hours, not bad. Definitely, considering it took us an hour and a half to do one pose, the rest of the walk came in pretty quick after that. Honestly, a lot of that is just kind of thinking through. That's really the big reason that I took so long just to do that one pose and explain everything is, as long as you understand what you're looking for and you think through, why are you rotating this? What's supposed to happen? How is it connecting to another body part? Everything kind of just falls into place. It doesn't make it simple. And as you saw, I had to redo certain things. I had to redo the spine. Once I got the hips in place, it meant I had to adjust certain things. I had to redo the arms afterwards because once I adjusted the body, now the arms need to be redone. But once again, as long as you kind of work your way from the root out and then kind of go back again and refine it, it's going to come in together. And yes, that first pose does take the longest. When you're new to animation, it's going to take a while to finish that first pose, and that is normal. That is how most animations work, because that first pose is what you're going to build everything off of. If you don't get that first pose correct, for example, if I didn't take time to think of how wide the stride is going to be, if I didn't take time to think how the character's feet are going to be posed in terms of how narrow it is or how wide it is, all of those things, that is going to affect every other pose down the line. And then if later I found out, maybe I should make the feet narrower, that could potentially lead to a lot of big changes and a lot of wasted time. So taking that time at the beginning just to make sure you've thought of things, it doesn't mean you're going to get it perfect, but it's at least going to reduce the amount of stress and changes you have later on.